What is a true fact so insane that it should be false? There is a 1 in roughly 5.2 to the 61st power chance, also known as a 52 novem decillionth, that if you were to slap a table, all of the molecules in your hand and the table would miss each other and your hand would go clean through it. Storytime, I learned this fact from a very deep intellectual conversation with my engineering class 2 years ago, so there could be very well some kind of detail I'm missing here, but nonetheless, what I said is theoretically true. There used to be a radioactive energy drink called Radithor that was in the US market for a decade from 1918 to 1928. Some of the more prominent users had to be buried in lead coffins. Didn't they take that off the market after some guy drank so many of them so quickly that his lower jaw fell off? Oh my god, he did. Apparently he even developed holes in his skull. That's horrifying. That poor guy. Giant squids have a donut-shaped brain so their esophagus can run through the middle. If they try to swallow too large a bite of food, they can get brain damage. You could take away all of Wayne Gretzky's goals that he scored during his career and he'd still be the all-time NHL points leader off his assists alone. Bonus Gretzky fact, he and his brother own the record for being the highest-scoring pair of siblings. Brent had 4 points in his whole career. Every day that you go to work, you pass by more strangers than the average medieval person did in their entire life. The youngest mother to give birth became pregnant at 4 years old. If a gorilla looks grumpy, it's because they're relaxed and at ease. The gravity of black holes is so great that it literally bends light around the black hole, so that if you could somehow stand close enough to a black hole and look straight ahead, you'd actually see the back of your own head. The USA is the third most populated nation on Earth. If you were able to add 1 billion people to the US population today, it would still be the third most populated nation on Earth. Yeah, India and China really have one heck of a lead. Not sure that this is either a good or a bad thing, really. I will say that after living in the population desert that I currently live in, your average city in India at least would be one hell of a shock to go back to. Greenland extends east of, west of, south of, and north of Iceland. When the 22nd President of the United States, Grover Cleveland, was 27 years old, he was friends with a married couple who had a baby girl named Frances. As a gift, he bought them a high-end baby stroller for little Frances. Then, 21 years later, he married Frances and she became the youngest First Lady. Think about that. A morbidly obese person can survive with absolute starvation without any sicknesses or feeling ill, under close control, of course. There have been studies since the 60s. There's a patient in 1973 who went under a 382-day starvation diet for therapeutic purposes under close control with only vitamin and mineral supplements and water intake, without protein, carbohydrates, or fat intake, like no food at all. He dropped from 207 kilos to 88 and maintained it. After a follow-up check 5 years later, the patient was 96 kilos and stabilized. Prolonged fasting had no ill effects. If anyone is curious about the article, the PubMed ID is PMC 2495396. You should keep in mind for anyone tempted to imitate, multiple others have attempted this after him and wound up dead. Do not try this at home. People were deliberately infected with malaria to cure their syphilis, and the man who developed this treatment, Julius Wagner Jurek, received the Nobel Prize for it. The extremely high fevers of the malaria infection killed the syphilis bacteria, and then the patients were cured of the malaria using quinine. The life of Frane Selak, the luckiest unlucky man in the world. January 1962, Frane is riding on a train through a freezing canyon when it fell into an icy river. All 17 other passengers died while he escapes with a broken arm and hypothermia. On 1963, his first plane trip, he's sucked out of the plane door and landed in a haystack unscathed. 19 other people were killed in that crash. 1966, he was riding a bus when it skidded off the road into yet another icy river. 4 passengers drowned while he only received some minor cuts and bruises. In 1970, his car's engine burst into flames while he was driving, but he managed to escape before it exploded. In 1973, in yet another driving incident, his car's engine was doused in hot oil from a broken fuel pump. This caused flames to shoot through the air vents, singeing off all of his hair. He was otherwise unharmed. He had a nice 22-year hiatus from his constant pain and suffering until in 1995 he was hit by a bus, but only sustained minor injuries. Then in 1996, to escape a head-on collision with a United Nations truck on a mountain curve, he swerved into a guardrail that broke on impact. To save himself, he jumped out of his car's open door and grabbed onto a tree branch as he watched his car plummet off the cliff. Suffice to say, the guy had a complicated relationship with the Grim Reaper. Adversely, in 2003, he won $1.1 million in US dollars, and in 2010 he gave the rest of his money to friends and family as he wanted to live a more frugal life. Giraffes eat bones. When I was in Africa, we were legit surrounded by a family of 12 giraffes. Then one of them bent over and picked up a gazelle carcass and looked us dead in our eyes as it ate its leg. It was so frickin' creepy. TASER is actually an acronym for Thomas A. Swift's electric rifle. TASER. Ireland was a net exporter of food during the Great Potato Famine. More people died making the V-2 rockets during World War II than were killed by them. Another fun fact about V-2 rockets: Germany was facing a large issue with rocket fuel shortages during the project because people kept drinking it. That fuel had been made from 70% ethyl alcohol and 30% water distilled from potatoes. It was the most economically viable fuel at the time since they were already very low on other fuels. To stop workers from drinking it, they denatured the alcohol, essentially poisoning it, but people kept drinking it anyways and getting extremely ill. Eventually, this simply caused people to start leaving the V2 program, suggesting that they were only ever there for the free booze. This also means that any alcohol over 70% ABV is stronger than actual World War II rocket fuel. Switzerland has accidentally invaded Liechtenstein 3 times in the last 50 years. On the first time, in 1976, the Swiss military got lost and ended up in Liechtenstein, so the Liechtensteiners offered them drinks like proper hosts. On the second time, in 1992, the Swiss military forgot that a certain observation post was actually not in Swiss territory, but in Liechtenstein territory, so they just said sorry and forgot about it. Then again, in 2007, the Swiss army got lost and entered Liechtenstein, but eventually realized they weren't in Switzerland anymore. Toto. So they turned back. Liechtenstein didn't even know this happened until the Swiss apologized, again, to which Liechtenstein basically said, "No problem, bro." Takeaway? The Swiss army are bad with directions. The Liechtenstein people are chill bros. The color orange is named after the fruit. Before, the color orange was called red. That's why people with orange hair are called redheads. The TSA's fail rate is over 80%. I personally know someone who in his carry-on accidentally packed a loaded 9mm, made it onto the plane and was so freaked out when he landed, he UPS'd it back home and took a Greyhound bus after his trip. I know an idiot that flew internationally with a gat in his checked luggage. It was on accident, but he's still a dumb idiot. He left out of Florida heading for South Korea with a layover in Japan. The Japanese found it and he was arrested and spent over 2 weeks in jail. They let him go eventually. A total friend of mine did the same with a folding knife. Wow, a TSA agent almost took my butter knife once. You know what? I don't think this is a shocking set of factoids to anyone. It is fascinating to me that the TSA's incompetence has been legendary for more than a decade now, and to me at least it still seems exactly the same as it was before. Ridiculous. Sharks evolved before trees did, and trees evolved before the bugs responsible for rotting did. You know, the bacteria which could eat lignin and cellulose. Thus, when trees died, they just fell over in place and lay there instead of rotting. Over time, the weight of the upper layers of the tree corpses compacted the lower levels, which eventually became the coal we dig up and use today. The coolest thing about this is since there were just so many trees blanketing the continents of the Earth that they were basically sitting on top of coal, and that whenever something like, say, a lightning strike hit a pile of dead wood, it could spark a forest fire that would rage across large swaths of whole continents, and they would last for years. Think about how frickin' insane that would look from space, or the top of a mountain. Just nothing but fire for as far as you can see in all directions. An eyewitness to Lincoln's assassination at Ford's Theatre told his story on national television. He was 5 years old at the theatre and 96 years old on his televised appearance. Only 4 people have been to the Challenger Deep, the deepest part of the ocean. One of those people is James Cameron, the director of the Titanic. Since this comment was written in 2019, that number has grown to 22. From 1613 to 1620, a samurai traveled to Rome by way of Mexico. During this time, Shakespeare was still alive, Virginia had been founded for around a decade, Galileo was accused of heresy, and Pocahontas arrived in England. He met the Pope, and he was made a Roman citizen. His name was Hasekura Tsunenaga, and he was the last Japanese person to officially visit Europe until around 1860. President John Tyler, born in 1790, has 2 living grandsons. The exact halfway point of Michael Jackson's life was January 27, 1984, the same day his hair was accidentally set on fire while filming a Pepsi commercial. There was this French guy named Terrer in the late 1700s who could eat anything in any amount. He was able to eat a quarter of a cow in one day, and ate a dinner for 15 people for one meal when he was being tested. He was even able to swallow an entire eel with bones included without hesitating. When he went to the military service, they used him as a message transport. But after being captured, he went back and tried to find a cure. In the hospital where he was staying, he was suspected of eating a baby, so they kicked him out. He was average weight, and when he died a few years later, they could see inside his stomach just by opening his mouth. They suspected him of eating a baby. He was caught multiple times eating corpses in the morgue, if I recall correctly. Well, technically, he was caught drinking human blood. There's no record of him actually eating corpses or corpse parts. Not that drinking the blood of dead people is much better. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Mike the Headless Chicken lived without a head for 18 months. A 500-pound cigarette-smoking, beer-drinking brown bear named Wojtek was enlisted and served in the Polish army during World War II. Private Wojtek helped the Polish Corps win the brutal Battle of Monte Cassino, and he was even promoted to corporal. Following the war, he retired in Scotland. Cheetahs can't roar, but they can meow like house cats. If every single person on the entire planet took part in a rock-paper-scissors contest, where everyone paired up and played, the losers were knocked out and the winners stayed on, you'd only have to win 33 times in a row to beat all 7.5 billion people on the planet. The longest time between 2 twins being born is 87 days. The twins were born at Waterford Regional Hospital. Amy was born prematurely on 1st of June 2012 and Kate followed on the 22nd of August. This is in the Guinness World Records. There is no universally accepted definition of vegetable. It's a culinary and cultural term and varies from place to place. In chess, there are over 9 million variations after just 3 moves each, 288 billion different possible positions after 4 moves each. In a complete game, there are more possible positions than there are electrons in the observable universe, and yet it's still the Sicilian every game. There were more planes destroyed in World War II than there are currently intact planes on Earth today. There's an extremely rare condition called Stoneman syndrome. It causes any of the smallest damages done to tissue to regrow into a bone. To explain it simply, people affected by this sickness slowly turn into living statues as they get older. The record for the most children born to one mother is 69. Nice. Valentina Vasilieva, a peasant from Shuya, Russia. In 27 labors, she gave birth to 16 pairs of twins, 7 sets of triplets, and 4 sets of quadruplets. If sound could travel through space, the roar of the sun would be deafening even though it's 93 million miles away. And for those of you asking, no, sound can't travel through a vacuum, and thank God. Obviously, lots of other things in the universe would change, and yes, presumably other stars and planets would make noise too. We'd probably all die screaming as the Earth itself imploded from the pressure of traveling so fast through a universe that wasn't a vacuum. One day, Mao Zedong saw a sparrow eating grain. Thinking that the sparrows were hurting China's grain supply, he and the Communist Party launched the 4 Pests campaign. The Chinese military and population killed every sparrow they could find. Embassies didn't allow the Chinese to kill sparrows on their property, so the Chinese banged pots and pans outside the embassies 24/7 until the sparrows died of exhaustion. Unfortunately for the Chinese, sparrows mainly eat insects, not grain. The locust population exploded, and 43 million people starved to death. Yep, put this one next to every other time we've tried to fix an environmental problem and caused a different one that's significantly greater than what we already have. Well done, human race. Maybe blocking out the sun to cease global warming will go differently for us. If you earned $1 every second, it would take 2,921 years to have more money than Bill Gates. We live many times closer to the last dinosaur than the first and last dinosaur did to each other. When Mount Everest was first measured, it was exactly 29,000 feet. It was reported as 29,002 because exactly 29,000 was not believable. To scale, the distance between a nucleus and orbiting electrons is 16 times longer than the distance between the Sun and Pluto. Oxford University predates the Aztec Empire by over 200 years. And for one of my favorites, woolly mammoths were still around at the time the Great Pyramids in Giza were built. Harvard didn't teach classes in calculus when it was founded because calculus wasn't discovered yet. Nintendo was founded in 1889. They ran, among other products, hotels that were essentially brothels. If you're launching from Earth, the most difficult place to reach in the solar system is the Sun. The reason for that is that if you were to fly directly into the Sun, you would first need to launch from Earth and then remove all of your orbital velocity around the Sun. Anything less will just put you into a different orbit around the Sun rather than directly into it. The amount of power required to do that directly is basically impossible currently. As an alternative, you could, for relatively little power, fly all the way out to Pluto distance, slow down much less, and then fall back into the Sun. The trade-off being the travel time is now about 90 years. There are other in-between paths that could get you there for different balances of energy and time, but all of them are tougher than basically getting anywhere else in the solar system with an equivalent balance. There's a mission currently traveling to study the Sun, the Parker Solar Probe. It won't be flying directly in, but it plans to make closer passes than any other probe has. It's going to make 7 passes by Venus to shed speed so it can get closer and closer to the Sun. The full flight time is planned as just less than 7 years. As of this post, they are 1 week shy of a year in. I mean, it's pretty well known by now, but calculators today have more computing power than Apollo 11. We got to the moon with slide rulers and huge cojones. Horses can't vomit. If Earth was a basketball, to scale, the moon would be a tennis ball. It would orbit around 7.5 meters away, which is a lot farther than most people think. If the nucleus of a hydrogen atom was a tennis ball, to scale, the electron would orbit at about 2,500 meters away. There's no ball small enough to compare how small electrons would still be at this scale. There is no good metric for the number of languages on Earth. This is mostly because linguists can't agree on what constitutes a new language and what constitutes a dialect of an existing language. The best current metric for how many languages exist is the number of translations of the Christian Bible. A fun little anecdote about the Bible translations into obscure languages, though. A missionary from our church works for a mission that translates the Bible into languages, heretofore untranslated, and adapts the books and chapters into an audiobook app. He was in a taxi in Kenya and asked the driver what his language was. The driver told him in English that he spoke Swahili. The missionary pressed him and asked if he spoke a local tribal language. The driver said he did and referenced an obscure language that he was sure the missionary wouldn't know. The missionary pulled up that language on the app and started playing the audiobook from some passage in the Bible, whereupon the astonished driver proclaimed, "That's my home tribe's language, and that's my cousin's voice." The Tyrannosaurus rex lived closer in time to us than it did the Stegosaurus. Even if 99% of Earth's population thought you were unattractive, 76 million people would still find you kinda hot. There are more trees on Earth than stars in the Milky Way. Every time you shuffle a deck of cards, you've probably made an entirely unique order as compared to every other shuffle in history. You can fit every planet between the Earth and the Moon, including all the gas giants. But if you lined up all of Jeff Bezos's money from end to end, it wouldn't fit between the Earth and the Moon. It would go to the Moon and back 34 times. Jeff Bezos has enough money to make a ladder to the Moon, and to make it out of money. GPS satellites have to compensate for time dilation because time runs at a different rate in orbit. Sense of smell is molecular, meaning that molecules of what you're smelling are actually inside of your body as a result of smelling them. Think about that the next time you enter a public restroom. Yep, when you smell someone's toots, it's too late. Their poop is already in your body. Enjoy that knowledge, folks. Don't you love learning things? If you shrink down our Sun to the size of a white blood cell, the Milky Way galaxy would be equal to the size of the continental United States. Space is huge. You see your nose all the time, but your brain just ignores it. Well, not anymore, thanks. The Planck scale is the smallest known unit of measurement. If you were to expand a single atom until it was the size of the observable universe, about 92 billion light-years in diameter, a single Planck unit at this scale would be about the size of an average tree. You are closer to being a millionaire than either Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos is. Well, between Jeff Bezos and I, we have the average net worth of 60 billion. Take that. Abraham Lincoln was born in 1809 and the first dinosaur fossil was discovered in 1819. This means that poor man went his early childhood without going through his dinosaur phase. A black widow spider's web is 12 times the tensile strength of steel. In the last 3,000 years, there were only 268 years in which there was no war going on in the world, that we know of. The phrase plastic surgery has nothing to do with the material. Plastic surgery as a field predates the development of plastics by 70 years. The two terms simply share a Greek word root meaning sculpted or reshaped. We live closer to the lifetime of Cleopatra than she did to the building of the Great Pyramids. In Florida, it's illegal to tie an elephant to a parking meter without first paying the meter as if the elephant were a car. Where in Florida do you find live elephants? And please don't say Disney World and Dumbo. In 1000 BC, a war was cancelled due to rain. I'll one-up you. Around the 500 BCs, the Medes, in modern-day Iran, fought the Lydians, from modern-day Turkey, in a war. During the war, there was a mother-frickin' solar eclipse and everything went black. Both sides freaked out and came to a peace agreement. They stopped fighting each other during the eclipse as they thought it was God telling them something. This has been known as the Battle of the Eclipse for centuries, but nobody really believed there was an eclipse. Then, scientists recently were able to backtrack and find out where every single solar eclipse happened, and lo and behold, it happened right around the date of the battle. So now it's viewed as a historical fact. A 17-inch pizza is bigger than two 12-inch pizzas. Pizza Hut is nickel and diming you.
People who have been on dead people's computers. Did you find anything you wish you hadn't?
Good friend of mine had a major stroke and went into a coma. Prognosis was not good and the family made plans. Since I was the one that knew about computers, they asked me to go through his stuff and find pictures for his memorial service. 2 laptops and 10 USB sticks later, I wanted to bleach out my eyes. My friend was a great guy, but he was morbidly obese. Apparently had been renting out escorts and such from online forums. They were far from pretty, and thankfully, my friend only appeared in a few pictures, but had his clothes on. Out of about 10 gigabytes worth of images, I was able to find 5 suitable for his memorial service. The toughest part was telling his family that I could only salvage 5 photos. I told them the hard drives were corrupted. Yep, I wiped them. No sense in letting them know what I found. On a positive note, I did adopt his parrot, and till this day, she keeps calling me by his name.
I'm disappointed we did not get a name for the parrot, and I would also be pretty traumatized if I discovered my friend's USB stick full of all of his finagling with ladies of the night. Turns out my brother was writing a novel and a ton of poetry. I always wonder if we should do something with it. I'm not sure how completed it all is, but my cousin who went through it said it was quite a bit of material. I'll seriously look into doing something with this now. I'm not sure if I'll be back in the US until this late summer, but I'll see if my cousin can upload the files somewhere next time she's at my parents' house. There are also piles and piles of notebooks and journals. Again, I'm assuming are his poetry and short story collections. He told me that's what he was writing in the notebooks. Those would take a while to go through since it is all handwritten. At any rate, he was a bit of a recluse for about 8 years prior to his death. He also had some severe substance abuse problems and an anxiety disorder. So the content/background for his work might be interesting if it gives insight on what was going on during that time. My mom said something that he was looking for a publisher at one point, so it is probably what he would have wanted for some of his works. I have no idea what the brother was writing, obviously, but I think that it's a very nice gesture in a way to honor a dead family member, to find a way to publish that work to some degree, and maybe even that work could go on to inspire someone else in the future in a positive way. A few months after my wife passed away, suddenly, I finally got around to cleaning out her PC and laptop. I'd barely gotten started when I came across a file that had its file associations removed. She did all the financial stuff, so I had to find out if it was something important. Of course, my first try was Word document, and sure enough, it loaded. Yeah, it wasn't financial. Turns out she'd written a list of lifetime goals that she wanted to reach, and it had been updated only weeks before she passed. A list of about 30 things she'd dream of doing, and only about 4 or 5 were crossed off. I didn't get much done after that. So I tried to find the file again per people's request, but I was not able to locate the file. I'm not sure what I did with it. Drank away most of my memory of that time, to be honest. But off the top of my head, I remember some of the more mundane things on the list. She wanted to buy a house, travel the world, start her own YouTube channel. I remember the most recent update was that she'd crossed off wanting to meet Alton Brown, which she did at a book signing just a short while before it happened. I remember she made sure to bring her nutmeg with her in case he asked. That would probably make me profoundly sad if I found that, but I would also hold the hope that they felt the same way as the dead wife from Up did, the whole "you were my adventure." Also, I have no idea who Alton Brown is, but apparently there's some kind of American TV host chef personality.
Not on the computer, but my family found a 3-ring binder my grandmother kept. It was full of lusty love letters. We asked one of her best friends about it, and she replied with, "Oh yeah, I was supposed to burn that." Apparently my grandma and this guy had a relationship where they never actually got together, but had a lot of frisky phone conversations. None of that is quite so bad, I guess, unless you start imagining that it was your grandma. She described many details of their talks in her letters and referred to it all as her year of passion.
God damn, Grandma. Good for you, though, girl. You do you, man. Just, damn. My father died a few years ago from colon cancer. Even though I was only 19, my brother was significantly younger when we lost him. He was 7. My father and brother would watch a movie usually every other night. And a few months ago, I finally got around to cleaning his computer. I looked through his folder where he downloaded movies to, and the last film he downloaded was Spirited Away. And it was the night before he passed away. Needless to say, we watched it together that night. Good film, definitely fits the story and the whole, theme of death we got going on in this subject, but I'm more of a Porco Rosso guy when it comes down to Studio Ghibli films. That one is my absolute favorite. TLDR, dead brother's computer, possible self-deletion. Wish that I hadn't found that he had already erased his computer history. When I was 18, I took my older brother's computer after he died in a car crash. He was the sort of guy that people loved to be around, always laughing, joking. He made people feel good about themselves. His car had run into a grouping of those cement jersey barriers on a road under construction. No other cars were involved and there were no signs that he had hit the brakes. He must have dozed off. While emptying his room in his house, we found a set of crumpled papers. They were the unfinished first sentences of self-deletion notes. But he never left a completed note, and instead chose to throw these drafts away. Maybe he sat down to write a note, decided he didn't want to die, needed some air, went for a drive, got into an accident. I couldn't understand how this happy, great guy that I loved could be so unhappy. So I searched his computer for any clues. I was prepared to look in every corner for a clue, an internet history, an AIM log. This was back in the day. A photo, an email, anything. There was nothing. Not just nothing strange. Nothing at all. He had already wiped his computer clean, probably anticipating that his little brother would inherit his computer and snoop around. It still doesn't confirm or deny anything for me. I feel certain that he intended to go through with it, but I've never been more upset to find absolutely nothing. Man, I completely understand why that would be, conflicting in a way, man.
TLDR, priceless memories, creepy smut. Oh good, this story. So my uncle took buttloads of pictures just all the damn time. We didn't actually realize the scale of this until I had to look through them all after he died. Turns out we could have lost every single picture of me, my sister, my cousins, and still we'd have a remarkably smooth transition from infant to adult in picture form. That said, we also discovered he liked smut. So much smut. And since we didn't want to accidentally throw away some priceless picture, I had to go through 3 hard drives and a couple hundred USBs and CDs of almost entirely smut. Now I was more impressed with his capacity to find and organize things than anything else. 4 gigabytes of name time-stamped videos and pictures of trans women with freakishly large breast implants urinating on men. We have the USB for that right this way.
I'm just gonna say, they said themselves that this uncle who died was a very organized individual. I'm sure they would have separated that stuff from those things. And honestly, it's at a certain point, morbid curiosity is all the excuse you need. It's if I found that, I'd be like, okay, how deep does this rabbit hole go? But hey, I ain't judging.
That's a goddamn lie. I'm judging everything.
My boss passed away in his sleep just over a year ago. He was young and it was unexpected. I helped his boss get into his computer at work and also his laptop from home to retrieve insurance, banking, investments, etc. information for my boss's family. It was very eerie in that I found my boss had a lot of the same tastes in music, TV shows, movies, etc. that I had. Visited the same websites, etc. I felt like he and I could have become much better friends if there'd been more time. I ended up getting almost everything for them. There are a couple of Excel files with financials that were password protected. I ran some brute force programs against them for a few weeks, but eventually my boss had me shut it down and then it was over. And so now I sit at his desk on his computer using his mouse and his keyboard and do his job. I like to think he's out there somewhere, watching over me, and that he'd be happy with what I've done in the last year. I hope so at any rate.
This one is a little odd because either he already respected the crap out of his boss and then found out about their common interests, but it seems more like in the way that they wrote it. Like I said, there's a lot of context probably missing from this, so don't take me as like, a hard truth or anything. But it seems like upon finding out that they had a lot more in common than they realized, he formed a parasocial relationship with a dead man. 9 years ago, not a personal computer, but my local library has a set of computers in there and people can get usernames and passwords and use the virtual desktops, given they have a library card. This old guy would use the computers a lot. I wasn't nosy, so I never looked in depth, but he was using a word processor, so I assumed he was typing letters or something similar. Anyway, I volunteered there over the summer and I had to close out inactive library cards, or ones that had paid dues. Basically, this meant I was deleting accounts by logging onto their virtual desktop and cleaning them out. The old man showed up in the lineup. Turns out he died a few months before. I opened up his desktop and went to documents because curiosity got the better of me and I wanted to see if he had anything some relatives wanted or something. There was his life, encompassed in 2 folders. Folder 1, novel. He was writing a memoir of his tales in World War II. Folder 2, Missy Missy. From what I could collect, was his wife. In it were dozens, if not over 100 documents of love poems and letters to her. I backed them up on a USB and intended to return them to his wife. I'm sure she would want the love letters. As it were, the wife was dead and he was buried next to her in the cemetery. I was sad, because these were letters to his long-dead wife. She had died in 2004. I gave the files to his son, who read them out loud at the old man's annual memorial mass as a eulogy and testimony to the love of his wife. Well, it might have made you sad, but it made me happy, because guess what? The greatest thing you can have is a love that transcends the bounds of life and death.
My girlfriend and I used to play Pokemon a lot. I still do, actually. But she passed away in a car accident a year ago. One day I opened up one of her games because I was feeling down and I noticed her main player was named after me and all her Pokemon were nicknames after pet names we gave each other. The thing is, I did the same thing in my game, but we never told each other.
Short and sweet, I love it, but it vaguely, ever so vaguely reminds me of the Animal Crossing comic about the dead mother. Absolutely melts my frickin' heart. God, look it up if you don't know what I'm talking about. No, but I got an old computer from church once. They upgraded and donated it to us. It was filled with horse smut. I don't go to that church anymore.
I say, may the Lord have mercy on the horse smut-loving heathen that resided in that there church.
Well, I sometimes help out at a charity that ensures ladies of the night have access to condoms and can reach out to police if they suffer violence, etc. At one point, we threw a fundraiser that sold art created by a former or occasional lady of the night and showcased the art of one deceased woman in particular, who I believe was about to begin transitioning to a man. I was given her hard drive through a friend of the family that worked in the organization and asked to retrieve what I could of her art and her life. My memory is a little fuzzy on most of this, but I think her death happened in the early 2000s. She had a fairly large Napster directory, and I think it was a Windows XP machine. To be honest, I don't think I found anything I wish I hadn't. Instead, I found a trove of beautiful art and a small window into someone's life. She was both a hobbyist and a professional photographer who had a webcam she made good use of. I saw her travels to India and South America. I saw friends of all shapes and sizes, mainly muscular and heavy tattooed, and action shots of her and her girlfriend. She had an active social life, and in most ways, she was just like the rest of us. I feel odd typing it, but I would have felt very voyeuristic if she were still alive. As it were, I didn't worry much about it and instead thought of it as a very serious responsibility. I guess ultimately I found a reminder that even people who do work that's derided or considered dehumanizing by some still lead normal and wonderful lives just like the rest of us, with the same struggles and joys and trials and tribulations. I'm glad I got to experience it.
Why did I give you such a doofy voice? Whatever, this next one's kind of depressing. TLDR, found my grandfather's writing on how much he hated my grandmother. When my grandfather passed away, we were going through his computer to save off important things. We mostly saved off genealogy information, but found one very strange item. My grandfather had written a book/thesis on how much he hated my grandmother. It was about 150 pages long, had a table of contents, and all sorts of hate-filled stories and anecdotes. My dad shared it with one of his brothers, and they waited about 5 years before showing it to my grandmother. I'm still not 100% certain that she ever needed to know about that book. One of my family members printed it out and mailed it to all of my aunts and uncles. My dad is one of 7. It was a huge drama fest for years. It seemed to have died down lately, though. 150 pages. A table of contents entirely dedicated to your hatred for presumably your wife. My God, the hatred in this man's heart is unfathomable. It is so strangely cruel and yet oddly sensible at the same time. I mean, he didn't murder her or anything. And plus the question is, was she bad? Was she so bad that it was warranted that he wrote this book? Just my God, this strange and yet beautiful world we live in. What the hell? Made a throwaway for this. This is my first time posting on Reddit. I had to get this off my chest. I knew my father had a vibrant internet life. He had been in IRC for a long time, maybe starting in like 1996. He had been a regular on the one channel for about 10 years. I think he was a mod or whatever the equivalent was. He talked about his online friends a lot. They seemed like great people and they were supportive when he got sick. After he died, I wanted to make sure they knew, but I wasn't sure how to get in touch with them. About 6 months after he died, I got a Facebook message. The sender said they were looking for a woman with my same last name who lived in my town. She was a regular in their chat and had cancer and they were worried about her. Approximately my father's age with the same kind of dog. The dog picture he sent was not my father's dog, but it looked similar and a photo of my father's very distinctive truck. After being in some shock, I realized that my father was doing some serious catfishing. He had posed as this woman for over a decade. Honestly, she sounded nicer than my father in a lot of ways. He sometimes had a major temper and could be a total butthole. This group of people really loved this woman in their community. I didn't know what to tell this guy. I wanted to tell the truth, they deserved closure, but if I lied and said she died, it would raise questions. Why was there no obituary, etc.? I did not want them to feel betrayed either. After thinking for a few days, I told him. He seemed really confused, but honestly not terribly upset. He said that he was sorry for my loss and hoped I would visit the chat sometime. We would keep the secret between us and he would tell the group that she died, but not the whole truth. I think this was the best way to handle it, but sometimes I regret it. I don't know what my dad would have wanted. Strange yet beautiful world we live in. Seriously, kids, be careful who you talk to online. You have no idea who you're talking to at any point on the internet. It could be anyone with any intention. They could just be messing with you for an entire decade for no other reason than just because they can. I don't know. I am honestly just shocked that this person, the online chat friend of the father, took it as well as they did. I would have to go away for like 10 minutes and process and then reply maybe.
Yeah, my uncle's laptop. We powered one up and there were all these weird selfies taken from overhead with him lying on his back. He was a gargantuan old shut-in/hoarder, so they looked really weird. And then there were all these hardcore twink smut videos and stills. This was odd because he had always been straight to my knowledge and kind of a homophobe. Yeah, I know, it should have been a red flag. And then it hit me. He was taking selfies to put himself in the picture, so to speak. Decades too late to be a twink. He was an old man trying to imagine he was young, beautiful, beautiful and able to explore something he couldn't have done in 1950s Texas. Before he died, he had become fixated on a couple of memories of friends coming on to him in swimming pools, etc. I now understand that he was fantasizing about missed opportunities to have fun. There was also an account for some kind of meetup site for guys. All old guys. I had to email the site and tell them this man is dead. We don't have a charger for the other laptop. I don't know what we'll find on it.
Utterly traumatizing. I don't know why I dedicated myself to such a stressful voice there. I was kind of trying to go for like the old lady, the wrinkly like stick of an old lady in the chocolate episode of SpongeBob, I guess. Anyway, I would be exceedingly careful about opening that second laptop. You might get Raiders of the Lost Ark if you open it.
Several years ago, a distant relative died and left their computer password protected. My grandma gave the computer to me and said that if I could pull everything off the hard drive and give it to his wife, he had a lot of finances and other important stuff on there, I could keep the computer. So I set to work, ended up just writing a script to brute force it since I had tried every combination of birthdays, pets, etc. I could think of, and my script found the correct password after 3 days. I find what one would normally expect. Finances, a ton of family pictures, assorted documents for work, some fairly tame erotica. Now you might be thinking that's what disturbed me. The fairly tame erotica. No, actually. What disturbed me was that I found in a subfolder of a folder on his desktop labeled 2001 resume. In that folder was about 11 gigabytes of lolicon smut. Keep in mind this was like 2008, so that's quite a bit. I searched the rest of the computer and found no trace of real CP, so I just ignored it since lolly is more or less legal. Didn't see any reason to drop this on the rest of the family, so I omitted it from the copy I made for them. Kept a few DVDs of the stuff though in case it ever came out that he had graped minus the G a kid or something and nuked the drive. Considering I was like 11 during all of this, holy crap, that was a shock to see.
I'm aware I said earlier that, yeah, I would look at stuff out of morbid curiosity if I was there, but as a rule, I would generally rather not be the go-to guy to go through a dead relative or anyone who's dead's old laptop files and stuff. I just don't want to be in that situation. Also, what was up with the 11-year-old genius?
A relative of mine, 40M, told me this story. His roommate in university was a very quiet person. Several years ago, his roommate got into an accident. He lost pretty much 10 years of memory. One day, my cousin found a USB belonging to his roommate in his bag. He phoned said roommate's parents. The parents decided to come and pick up the USB. My cousin, not being able to resist temptation, looked through the files. He found plans for a self-deletion note, a journal about the roommate's depression, and draft of a very sorrowful please come back letter to said roommate's former girlfriend. My cousin, looking at the joyous, blissful, loving post-memory loss picture of roommate, straight up formatted the USB. My cousin told me that he believed that his roommate would be better off without these memories.
Now that is a juicy goddamn story. Now I gotta say, I've always been kind of like, is long-term amnesia really a thing? I'm sure it is, but it's one of those things where because I haven't experienced it personally, there's just a degree of skepticism I have towards the whole concept where it's like, really? The memories are just gone? It's not like they're in little glass containers that shatter and then the memory dissipates into the air and up into the goddamn stratosphere and it's gone forever. It's somewhere in your noggin, you just can't freaking remember it. I don't know, it's a weird thing. It's so hard to explain because I don't freaking have it. Hopefully you understand what I mean though, in terms of the skepticism of it. If someone told me they had amnesia, my immediate go-to, my immediate conclusion would be they're screwing with me. This was such a weird, funny topic to do. I mean, all the people's actions, I have to question some of their reasonings for keeping some stuff and looking at things and whatnot, but what a funny one to do.
Teachers of Reddit, what's the funniest reason you've had to send someone to the principal's office? Not entirely the principal's office because they were kindergartners, but two boys turned off the lights in the bathroom, had their pants around their ankles, chasing each other around in the dark and peeing on each other. That was a weird one to explain to the parents. I work at a daycare and we couldn't figure out why the bathroom smelled like pee so bad even though it gets cleaned twice a day. After a few days, one of the teachers was tying a boy's shoes when she looked into the bathroom and saw another boy peeing directly into the floor drain. Apparently half the class was peeing down the drain instead of into the toilet. Unfortunately enough for young kids, peeing is funny, and they tend to go places with that. A kid dropped a folder full of Xeroxed copies of his hairy butt. Turns out he'd been taping them to people's lockers all over school. Maybe someone told him he had a nice butt and he felt obliged to share it with the rest of the world. My dad worked as a teacher in a school for misguided youth. On the first day, he wrote his name on the board as new teachers do, and when he turned his back towards the class, a kid had lit his desk on fire with hairspray and was just laughing. 3-foot-high flame no more than a foot away from him. I had a 6th grader who was, just to paint the picture, a human incarnation of Ralph Wiggum, who wanted to get out of class so desperately that first he raised his hand and said his ears were ringing and he needed to go to the nurse. Sorry kid, not falling for it. 20 seconds later, he raised his hand and said his tongue was burning and needed to go to the nurse. Not falling for it, Ralph. 10 seconds later, he had blurry vision. He was squishing his eyes with his hands. No dice, kid. And then, in the grand finale, he stands with a flourish and yells so loud that teachers all down the hall stuck their heads out into the hallway. My dong is bleeding! We all stood mouths agape until the one wise guy in the class adds, "And you want the nurse to look at it?" What did this kid have to get out of class so bad for that he felt the need to yell that to everybody? I didn't send him to the office, but one of my favorite moments was one time I was working with a small group while other students worked on independent stuff around the room. One student was working pretty close to me and obviously made a mistake because he exclaimed, "Crap!" except he didn't say crap. So I said, "Excuse me, Ty? What was that?" And he says, "Oh, I didn't say what you think I said, miss." And I said, "Oh, good. What did you say?" He says, "I said shit," obviously thinking very hard. And then just stared at me horrified. I was trying so hard not to laugh, but I just told him, "I thought that's what you said. Please don't use that language in my classroom." We were doing sketch comedy in 6th grade a few years back, and seeing as it was a nice day, we went outside to practice. From across the field, I see one of my students very clearly and aggressively trying to put his junk on a prone classmate. When I asked him, he said it was for his sketch, and he was playing a character named the Iron Teabag. The best was the follow-up text from my boss saying, "I had to Google what teabagging was before I met with the kid." Sounds like they may have an instant classic on their hands. I had a kid show up to band with a massive black adult toy instead of his clarinet, and he honestly thought I wouldn't notice. Dude, everybody's gonna notice. Not a teacher, but a classmate in my drafting class was sent to the dean for 3D rendering a massive dong. My teacher saw it, commended him for his work, and asked him to print it out. He then stapled it to a referral and sent him to the dean. Glorious. Not a teacher, but we had an older lady as a science substitute in 8th grade. It was a hot June day and the windows were open. We were on the 2nd floor. My friend told the sub when she walked in the classroom that Jimmy had fallen out the window. When the sub looked out the window, she saw Jimmy lying on the ground contorted, and she passed out. We never got a chance to explain to her that it was a joke. He had just laid down on the sidewalk under the window. The 2 boys got suspended and that sub never came back. You guys probably left her with a very traumatic memory. I'm a male 5th grade teacher. One of my boys yelled out right before the 3:15 bell rang, "Everybody be quiet, I have a boner." I was like, did he just say that? The way he said it made me giggle like a schoolgirl. Luckily, no one noticed me turn and bust out laughing. No one else really seemed to notice what he had said. The bell rang to go home and I call him over. I asked him if he knew what that was. Very innocently, he said no. Then I thought, oh great. I could tell by his face that he wasn't lying. So I said, well, it's when your private parts get hard. Right when I said that, he got this very scared look on his face and said, I promise I didn't know that. Like I said, I could tell he wasn't lying. I had a very hard time keeping a straight face. He said his friend had yelled that out once, so he thought he would. I told him he can't say those kinds of things, and he has to be careful what he says. He walked away very embarrassed. I laughed and laughed when he left the room. Kids at that age be saying some crazy things without really knowing what they're talking about. A girl got so drunk that she locked herself in the bathroom. We found her and obviously had to call her parents to come take her home. We kept telling her, listen, it's your dean and you have to unlock the door. She kept responding in the horrible drunk teenager voice, now you listen, I'm your dean. It was very difficult for us to not break down in laughter. Stupid kids. Getting drunk at school doesn't exactly sound like a good time. 2 of my 5th grade students were arguing on our way back to music class, so I went over to see why they were talking in line. I asked what was going on, and the first kid said that the other kid had called him gay. The second kid looked me straight in the eye and said, I didn't call him gay, I called him a B word. I sent them on their way to the principal's office and sarcastically thanked them for the extra paperwork. I worked in a computer-based classroom at one point where the students took many of their classes online. Some of them tried to cheat the system by copying and pasting short phrases into all the fill-in-the-blank or essay responses, hoping it'd glitch and pass them through. Quickly discovered one student had been pasting homo 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 into all his responses, which backfired pretty well in one particular instance. Question: copy the words that apply to you. Answer: homo homo homo. I hope you marked them all incorrect except for that one. First year of high school, I got sent to the principal's office by my near-retirement teacher for breaking dress code with my t-shirt that had drug references and paraphernalia on it. The funny part was when my principal had to explain to my teacher that Billabong is a legitimate clothing company name, and nothing more. In 6th grade, during a school mass, my buddies made up a thing called Wiener Whack Wednesday. Self-explanatory. Go around nut-tapping everyone. Well, our really hot teacher caught 2 kids doing it, and we had a whole lecture our next period. She asked if any of us knew anything about it, and all the girls told the teacher what was up. Every single guy in our class, 15 at the time, small Catholic school, got called to the office. We had to take turns talking to the principal and explaining that none of us were gay. Then she made us call our parents. I was really freaking out that my father would think I was gay. I love how this is going on and that's their concern. Not the fact that y'all are just whipping it out and smacking each other with it, as long as you're not gay. Not a teacher, but saw a kid stand up in Russian class to do a speech on a topic of World War II Russia. He decided to do the whole speech on why Hitler was the greatest. Now, our teacher was born in Russia, grew up during the Soviet Union, and came to Minnesota to teach. She was horrified. If you think that the United States hates Hitler and Nazis the most, you've not studied Russia in World War II. I was glad, because this knucklehead and his douchey friends ruined Russian class for 4 years. I had this obnoxious, smarmy, show-offy 5th grader. One day, he was up to his usual tomfoolery, and a girl silently got up, opened the classroom pencil sharpener, and dumped the shavings all over the kid. I had to send her to the office, but it was a truly satisfying moment for the whole class. Sounds like she was willing to take one for the team there. I was covering another teacher's class in a computer lab, and we have a program called Net Support that basically allows you to spy on the kids' computers. It also serves some legitimate instructional purposes, like allowing you to take control of a kid's computer so you can demonstrate things. Only this teacher never used it, so I don't think the kids knew it existed. I normally don't use it because I don't like the big brother vibe it gives off, but there was a kid being a totally obnoxious jerk. He was looking up stupid and distracting videos and laughing loudly about them and making obnoxious comments to show off in front of his friends. I could have blocked YouTube, but instead I took control of his computer. I started typing in kitten videos into YouTube, My Little Ponies, anything that I could think of that wouldn't be cool for him or his friends. Then, every time he started to freak out and insist to his friends that he wasn't doing it, I gave him back control, and shortly after would take it away again. Then finally, I made a little pop-up come up on his screen that said, "I'm watching you." I expected him to figure out what was going on, but I think he got freaked out instead. It never seemed to occur to him that it was me, so I gave him control back and he did his work quietly for the rest of class. We had this in the engineering building. I was a teacher's assistant and this kid was playing some flash game rather than doing whatever design project he was supposed to be doing. So I would wait until just as he was about to beat a level and ever so slightly screw him up. He didn't know I had this ability, so he was getting crazy frustrated. Seeing him get visibly frustrated, I went over to his desk and said something along the lines of, "I know the program can be hard to learn. Let me see what you've got so far and I'll help." Oh, the shame he had when he turned high screen and didn't even have SolidWorks or whatever open. If I were you, I would have just kept messing with him for the rest of the day. I went to a small Catholic high school in the Seattle area. We had monthly Mass in our gym, and every year around Easter we did the Stations of the Cross. Mass was always brutal, but the stations lasted 2.5 hours or so. Unreal. A little background, I couldn't burp until I was in my early 20s. I have no clue why, but any built-up gas had only one exit. Growing up, I farted to the point that people thought I had a medical condition. People even called me Fart Boy. Anyway, it was my senior year and we were headed to the dreaded Stations of the Cross Mass. My friends and I had let one rip in class a number of times, but never during Mass. We always talked about doing it, but never mustered the courage. I decided about a week before that this would be the day. The Mass was set up where the choir would sing before each station. I think there were 11 or something, and then the priest would ramble on about its significance. Each time the choir stopped, there would be about 10 seconds of complete silence. We're on the 5th station and the choir is finishing when all of a sudden I unleashed a behemoth right as everything went silent. I was sitting on gym bleachers, which probably amplified the blast perfectly. I remember the guy in front of me inexplicably holding a yellow plastic screwdriver, and he dropped it. In shock or from the blast wave, we'll never know. My buddy and I proceeded to muffle our laughter for at least an hour until Mass ended. I've never tried to not laugh for that long before or since. Each time one of us would start to settle down, the other would release a cackle that started the whole process over again. We didn't even get in trouble. I'm sure the teachers thought it was an accident or never wanted to speak of it again. I'm laughing right now. One of my favorite memories. In high school, I got called into the principal's office. They put a screenshot of the Urban Dictionary entry for Cleveland Steamer in front of me and asked why I was looking at that. I laughed my butt off and said I was just doing some research and got sent back to class. Guys, I'm going to tell you right now, don't Google it. I used to work in a super strict school for kids who got kicked out of their regular schools. We had an assembly twice a day, morning and afternoon, that was extremely serious. Kids had to sit up straight with their hands in their laps, girls on one side and boys on the other, totally silent, that kind of thing. Occasionally, when we were having behavior problems with entire groups, we'd make them sit in assembly for the remainder of that period or however long until they could get it together. There was a class of middle schoolers, naturally, who could not stop farting. They'd intentionally fart as loud as they could to be gross and disruptive, and it even evolved into them getting up out of their seats and farting on each other. This is hilarious to me now, but it got really old and really smelly. Anyway, one day it was happening so much throughout each class that we took them to assembly. I'm standing in front with one of the other teachers, and our principal was talking to them, except he was mad. So he's pacing back and forth, reaming these kids out, punching his fist into his hand, spit flying out of his mouth. His face is bright red. He's saying all this stuff about respect, and then he adds in, "Oh, and if you have to fart?" And he yelled the word fart with such venom and disdain that I just lost it right there in front of everyone. I could not stop laughing. I tried to play it off like a coughing fit or something, but I couldn't. I had to leave the room. Not a teacher, but the last time I was sent to the principal's office was over a live chicken in high school. The high school I went to used the 8-block schedule system. My last period teacher was afraid to the point of hilarity of birds. We had chickens at home, and since they were 4-H chickens, they were quite docile. I put one in a duffel bag one morning and then put it in the top shelf of my locker. They'll just fall asleep if it's dark. So once last period came, I put it in the bag. She was used to us all bringing bags in since it was last period, and when she got up to put the attendance slip on the door, I just took it out of the bag and put it in the middle of the room. Hilarity ensued, and I spent the next day playing Pokemon in suspension in the cafeteria. Is it really suspension if they just let you hang out and play Pokemon? The year was 1987. Second grade me decided to bring the Penthouse mags I found under my dad's bed to school. I found them the night before and thought up this whole plan. It was cold, so I slid them in between the pocket of my jacket before leaving in the morning. Shortly thereafter on the playground, I was showing my buddies all these beautiful women. Finally, get to class and found out my teacher was ill and was replaced by a sub. Thinking I had it made, I slid the mags under all my papers in my box and just went about my day. Just before lunch, the sub started going through boxes, searching for a folder for the neighboring teacher. That's when she screamed. The sub was waving the penthouse at me while dragging me to the principal's office. To make things that much better, my sweet 80-year-old grandma was the one to pick me up. I made the mistake of leaving a 9th grader in my classroom when he missed the bus home. I had to go to a meeting and it was pouring rain, so I let him stay. I told him not to use the computers. The meeting was in the computer lab. We were learning how to see all of the students' computers on our own screens. The tech guy had us all pull up our first period classes on our monitors to test it out. No student should have been logged onto a computer at the time. All the screens should have been blank. I saw that a very conservative Jehovah's Witness teacher in the row ahead of me had one screen lit up on her multi-screen view. I watched as she clicked on the screen to see it larger. She gasped. She made a small whining sound. It was anime-style adult content. It was the screen of the student I had left alone in my room. The teacher quickly turned around, calling my name very loudly, and asked if the student was in my classroom. I told her he was. I got up and went to the phone at the back of the room. I called my classroom number. The student answered. I said, "You're doing something you shouldn't be right now, aren't you?" He said, yeah. I said, "I suggest you turn it off right now." I heard footsteps running across the floor and a slam. He returned to the phone. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. We'll talk about this later, I said. I hung up. What an unlucky kid. He chose to watch that on the wrong day at the wrong time. I don't know about unlucky. Sounds like he just made a really bad decision. There was a student with autism who lived in a very literal world. We'll call him T. You had to be very precise with your words, as T could not comprehend slang or figurative language. He had an issue with another student at recess the day prior. It was something minor about a basketball. Basically, T had a basketball and placed it under the goal and walked away. Another student grabbed it. T became angry and ultimately gave the ball to the other student rather begrudgingly. Apparently, T told his uncle, and the uncle's response was, "I'd have made that kid eat a poop sandwich." Well, T made a quick stop by the litter box before coming to school. He also wrote a note to the other kids saying, "I get the ball today, you can have this poop sandwich." It wasn't a gesture he viewed as inappropriate. He actually thought the poop sandwich was a viable option for the other student. I had to send him to the office, but my God did I laugh. Even his mom laughed before apologizing. The principal still has the note in the office 2 years later. I'm sure the kid receiving the sandwich probably didn't find it as funny. I'm not a teacher, but my mother is. A kid in her class asked if she had any kids. At the time, I was my mother's only child. She mentioned me and the kid goes, "Well, what school does he go to?" And of course, my mom answers without hesitation. The kid goes, "Good, I'm gonna blow it up." Instantly expelled. Yeah, I don't think there's any other course of action to deal with something like that. I didn't even send the kid. I was too amused. I asked one of my students to come smash a giant spider on my desk. Being 9 years old, he walked up with an impressive swagger, trying to show all his friends how brave he was. He took one look at it and whispered, "Oh, F word." I was the only person who heard him, so I just stifled my laughter and told him I wouldn't write him up if he killed it. He did and was the talk of the lounge at lunch. I teach at a university, so I didn't send him to the principal, just out of class. I once told a student to leave class because he never brought his textbook and constantly played on his phone. So after 2 classes of this, I told him to get out because he was distracting other students. This kid freaked out, yelling and cursing at me. Keep in mind, I'm a 5'2" female and this kid's about 6 feet. The rest of the class is like, "What the heck?" And I stared him down and said, "Get the F out of my classroom!" Kid picked up his books and left. From that point on, anytime someone screwed up in class, the rest of the class would shout, "Get out of my classroom!" at them. They all thought it was hysterical that I cowed this giant. I mean, you gotta let them know who's boss early on.
People who saved all of their money at a young age instead of living and now are 50 plus years old. How are your lives today? Do you regret your life choices when it comes to the money aspect? We scrimped for decades. Our house is paid off. We have 1 car payment for 3 more months. We have no credit card debt. Our retirement savings are ahead of schedule. Next week, we head to Iceland for my 52nd birthday. Totally worth it. Nobody wants to be 75, sick, and too poor to quit working, no matter how much fun you had as a 20-something. I did mostly stupid things in my my early 20s, but I always put at least 15% of my income into 401ks with matching benefits. After 24 years living the corporate middle manager cube life, we had the means to purchase a wholesale nursery, and now I'm a flower farmer. I just walked through my greenhouse with my dog with a cup of coffee, and I do not regret a penny of savings. Losing my job as a fairly well-paid engineering manager in the defense industry and having to sell my house during the housing crash in the early 90s ended up, in retrospect, being a defining moment in my current financial well-being. It took roughly 6 years to get back to anywhere near my former career trajectory after landing a good position in the cellular industry. Once brunt, twice shy, my wife, a registered nurse, and I bought a home that was about half the price the bank said we qualified for. Our reasoning being, if one of us lost our job, most likely me again, because nurses, we wouldn't have to lose our home again. Fortunately, that never happened. We were both able to advance in our careers and were able to pay off our mortgage in 7 years, fully fund our son's college education, max out our IRA contributions, and have literally no debt. My wife just paid cash for a Subaru Forester, not the fanciest of cars or a status symbol by any means, but she loves it. Today is literally my last day at work before I voluntarily retire early at the age of 58. I feel like this is for the most part going to be very one-sided, except for people who have had just rotten luck in finances or maybe property investment or something like that, or bad tenants. We lived far below our means for nearly 30 years, saving all the money we could, bought a nice piece of property in the woods and started building a house, paid for construction out of our savings, took years to build, ended up with our dream house with no debt at all. Early 50s, I work at my profession part-time and my wife gardens, almost retired, totally worth it. While we were in savings mode, it didn't seem like we were sacrificing. Still had a great time with life, just drove cheaper cars and lived in a small house, took vacations to visit friends instead of going to resorts. Living within our means meant we had no money worries after we got out of our 20s. I didn't live while at college. While all of my friends went to university and are in mountains of debt, I went to a junior college to get all of my basic classes out of the way, and then went part-time to university, which was cheaper and I could afford it while working a part-time job. It was a local university, so I had to live with mom and dad until I was 26, which sucked and I missed out on a lot of independence that comes with going away to school, but it was worth it. I graduated in 6 years with my BA instead of 4, but with no debt. Without a monthly student loan, I was able to pay off my car quickly and can afford a lot of other things, phones, computers, vacations, tools, Legos, etc., without worrying about where the money will come from. My wife and I live comfortably, she did the same thing, and we currently have a house, a 3-year-old, and newer cars. I survived cancer surgery. All of those have been paid off except for the house, which will be paid off 10 years before it's due. We currently have 30 grand in checking and 42 grand in savings, in large part because we sacrificed when we were younger. Point of reference, 55 years old. Did most everything the way you're supposed to. School, real jobs, lived conservatively, married, lowish tolerance for risk, yada yada. It depends on one's definition of living, but for the most part, most of my regrets are about not having lived or taken chances, or however you want to say it. It became apparent to me when I was an editor of a windsurfing magazine, and around a lot of the sailors we covered, I was the one with a steady job and paycheck. A wife, I owned a home, drove a decent car. These guys were drifters, irresponsible couch surfing, earning poverty wages, teaching windsurfing at various vacation destinations when they weren't competing. Most traveled around with pretty much everything they owned, their gear and clothes, and lived with their parents some of the time and friends and folks they met on the road at other times. Rarely did these guys have health insurance or more than a couple $100 to their name at any one time. Yet these losers on the fast track to nowhere spoke multiple languages, traveled the world and experienced things that I never did or will. Plus, if I compared notes with any of them now, 15 plus years later, our lives probably wouldn't be all that different. It's not like I'm some multi-millionaire or saving lives or changing the world. I'm just a regular schmuck with a regular job like most of them likely are. But when we reflect, they've got a crap ton more cool stuff to remember than I do, much of which probably shaped them to be as cool now as I thought they were back then. I'll be 50 in February. I was a workaholic in my 20s and 30s and tried to save money, in that I didn't travel, take vacations, buy new cars or new clothes, etc. I missed out on 2 women who could have been great wives and mothers and instead married an insane person at 34. It took me a decade and her adultery for me to realize I could never change how her brain worked. She had 3 diagnosed conditions, and I finally got out. Now I'm too old to remarry or have children, and due to bad luck and 2 recessions, I have little to show for it. Although I do live in a nice house because my father left it to me when he died. I'm a tad regretful that I didn't live when I was young and had more energy. Many of my friends did and still do get into relationships and travel, have children, and live life to the fullest. I'm getting to the point where I don't have the will to try again. This is the first time I have written this publicly. Definitely unfortunate about the crazy wife. I don't think you're going to find anybody in this thread that says, "Oh boy, I wished I had lived a little more in my 30s and now my spouse is dead and it was all a waste." What you'll find are people who lived the life they wanted to live. If traveling the world wasn't important at age 21 or 50, I doubt it will become hugely important at age 51. And if it does, awesome for them. The world has changed a lot in the last 30 years and they'll have different experiences than someone who, say, traveled, partied, spent money earlier in life. Each has its own pros and cons. Not to be a negative Ned here, but I just want to point out that all the savers who died before being able to spend their nest egg won't be commenting for obvious reasons, although I'm sure their next of kin were grateful. I'm a 27-year-old that saves and invests more than 50% of my income, so I'll probably be the kind of person you're referring to around 50 or so. I think the relationship between living and spending need not be so highly correlated. I think many people have consumerism addiction where they need to buy a product to get a dopamine hit, whether the product adds to their life in a meaningful way or not. I live in a cheap apartment, drive a used car, eat food I make mostly myself, go on long hikes on trails where I'm not charged, train for and compete in marathons a couple of times a year, surf, never buy a new board. There's no reason why living needs to be so expensive that it results in no money being saved. The routine for many people seems to be work plus suffer, purchase product to feel relief, put product in garage amongst the other thousands of things you don't use, bank and investment account remains at $0. This is not a good cycle. Nah, wait a minute. He's got a point. Yeah, I definitely nominate this one so far as the best one I've heard. I'm an aging Gen Xer and it was totally worth it. House is paid for, so the mortgage money goes to investment, kids, and fun. My wife was able to quit her job and stay at home since one salary was enough now. She may go back to work just to keep busy and because she wants to. We almost never paid interest on anything except the mortgage when we had it. Credit cards paid in full each month. We saved to buy cars and never financed them. We also keep cars for 10 to 20 years to maximize their value. My wife is a fanatic couponer and saved hundreds every month. She also just knows her prices and knows a good deal. So when it's time to spend, we spend wisely. I also insist on quality, so we will spend more if something is worth it. Additionally, we paid off the house in 10 years rather than 30. Between the cars, house, and credit cards, we saved hundreds of thousands of dollars on interest, which all went to investments. We max out our 401k contributions each year. IRA for wife now. I know things are harder now, and I feel for the millennials who want to do what I did but just can't. I work with many of them. I'm the old guy at work, and they are great people. All smart, aware, and hardworking. I don't see the entitled thing at all. Maybe I live in a bubble, but this generation is pretty cool. Learn from parents who grew up in the Depression with 6 children. We were still able to live below our means and never felt like we were going without. If you use your imagination, there are plenty of things you can do for free and have fun. We made it a point to set aside part of my check first into a retirement account. My wife did not work, but worked hard staying home with our kids and housekeeping. Paid off the house in 17 years instead of 30 and actually retired early. All our children are self-sufficient and we are worth well over 7 figures. The funny thing is, even with all this money, we still don't splurge but have everything we need. I think the trick is to realize the difference between needs and wants. I have to thank my parents for this. We always asked ourselves, do we need this or want this? Also ask yourself if you can buy this used. We have always bought used cars with cash and kept them until the wheels fell off. We also gave generously to local charities as we felt so fortunate. So here's my deal. Retired at 52 but got killed earlier with a bad divorce and still managed to retire early. I've been sailing a yacht for 7 years now, halfway around the world. How? Absolutely put a minimum of 20% of your gross income away. If you can't get most of that into a tax-deferred account, you should be looking at 25 to 30%. Cold hard reality, no magic, and no wishing. That's a big chunk of your income. If you haven't started it, it will hurt too much, so you'll likely fail. I always advise you start with what you can manage, then increase it when you get a raise. As in, up your savings by at least half of the raise. Get to 20%. Get that money into the market while young. Try to get it automatically deposited into your retirement account so you don't see it, so you're not tempted. Other tips. Get out of debt. Debt equals slavery. Never borrow unless you must, as in a house, buy a car that you can afford to pay with cash. Save for it if you must. It's an old concept, but credit is for the the weak and those who will work into old age. Face it, you're a working stiff. The only time you pay yourself is when you invest in your freedom, your retirement. All other expenditures prolong your enslavement.
Yeah, man, we're all nothing but sleeping slaves for the government, man.
I'm 44, so I'm not 50 plus yet, but I've invested mostly 401k, as much as I could afford since I started my first real job in 1994. As long as the economy doesn't do another 2008 anytime soon, I'm on track to retire by 55, maybe a year or two earlier with some luck. We simply don't live like we've got a lot of money. My wife's car is a 2008 Kia. Until a few months ago, I was driving a 2000 Saturn. I bought a 2013 Chevy Volt, used, and love it. I love not having to pump gas all the time, and I end up spending less to drive that way. Electricity is cheaper than gas. I gave my 2000 Saturn to my daughter to have something to drive at college. My eldest started college this year, and while she will have a little bit of student debt, a couple thousand each year, we'll probably pay it off once our mortgage is paid off in a year or two. It was more of a cash flow issue than anything. The original plan was to have the house completely paid off by the time the eldest started college, but we had a couple of years where we had to stop paying ahead on the mortgage due to the unexpected medical expenses. So now we're a little behind schedule on that. When we were looking for houses 15 years ago, the realtors were trying to get us to buy houses based on what we could afford, which meant that they were trying to get us to buy McMansions. I had to fire one realtor because she wouldn't stop, even after we told her we weren't interested in anything beyond 2.5 times my annual salary. So yeah, we could be living in a house that's valued at 2 or 3 times the one we live in, but then I wouldn't be retiring at 55. Honestly, it's all about delaying gratification and intentionally not choosing the most expensive thing you can afford. Our kids get 3 presents for Christmas, and none of them cost more than $30. That's better than my folks could afford, but it's not extravagant. I have work colleagues who spend $300 plus on their kids per Christmas. That's crazy to me. Our newest car until a month or two ago was a 2008. Many people won't delay gratification that long. They want a new car every 3 years. By taking care of what you have, it can last a lot longer. My eldest is driving the 2000 Saturn, and despite having 120,000 miles, it looks and runs like new. I learned to do regular maintenance myself, changing brakes, fluids, tires, even replaced the air conditioning compressor with one from a junkyard years ago. That Saturn has never had anything other than synthetic oil, things like that. You take care of stuff, it lasts a long time. And don't be so prideful that you have to have new stuff all the time. I mean, is impressing your neighbors that important to you that it's worth an extra 15 years of work? Not to me, it isn't. Based on how things are sitting right now financially, we're on track for compounding interest to take over within a decade and match our income from working. At that point, we won't be able to spend it all unless our taste changes dramatically, and I wouldn't expect that. Once we reach that point, it'll just be a matter of slowly shifting all the investments to lower and lower risk, like rental income, bonds, and money markets, until the income stream is pretty safe, and then I won't work anymore. Okay, I'm craving a different perspective on this now. I'm 46 and don't really have much of a retirement. I was a teacher in the South and mostly just lived paycheck to paycheck, just getting by. But this isn't really about me, although I'm sure the circumstances has colored how I view money and savings. My 2 sisters and I grew up poor, although we really had no idea just how poor we were. My father worked a factory job with all of the overtime he could get while my mother stayed home with us till we were in 5th grade. My father had refused to allow her to work before marriage. My mom worked and lived with her parents, saving virtually every cent she made for her future home. After marriage, my father decided to spend her savings on a 2-bedroom trailer to sit on my grandfather's property instead of investing in the home of which my mom had always dreamed. Years went by and the house they had hoped to build no closer, and the trailer falling down about our ears. They had the house plans but no money to build, and my father refused to take out a loan, insisting that they pay for it as they could. At this point, after countless arguments, my father agreed to allow my mom to return to work. I was in 5th grade. I remember watching our house slowly take shape behind the trailer. Mom had promised we could have a sleepover when it was completed. We moved into the mostly complete house my sophomore year of high school, but much work remained and still remains. My mother died of pancreatic cancer when she was 53, having never seen her house completed or driven a new car. She saved and scraped her entire life and never got to enjoy the things she most wished for. This was nearly 25 years ago. So yes, I understand the necessity of saving, but more so, I understand the importance of spending and enjoying life while you have it. I'm 30 and saved to a fault until I started my own company 3 years ago. I'm already considerably way ahead of my peers and have opportunities to get in deals that most wouldn't be a part of. The first 100k is tough, but compounding interest is a real thing. I have always lived well below my means, and the freedom I have now was completely worth skipping the 2K spring breaks during college. I wasn't sure the saving would be worth it, but it absolutely, completely is and was. I don't save as much anymore because my net worth is mostly tied to my business. I still save more than most, but not 50 to 70% of my income like before. When I lost $35K in a month of business ownership, saving $3 on coffee seemed a bit trivial. Bonus, it's true. Money won't make you happy. Not having money will make you unhappy. But having 1 million instead of 500K isn't really life-changing. I plan on making a lot more because I enjoy creating value, and that's how capitalism works. I don't think anyone needs more than 10 million, but that's just me. 300K guaranteed a year in interest and dividends without touching the principal, it's pretty good living. Spending 1,000 a day for the rest of your life would be exhausting. My opinion has changed before, but I value my time more than money now. Getting from 10 to 100 million seems like a whole lot of work and risk and stress for not very much change in lifestyle. I have employees making well above 70K magic number, and they're still broke and trying to keep up with the Jones. Living paycheck to paycheck seems horrendous. Your 45K truck doesn't make me think you're cool. It makes me think you're stupid. Minimalism solves a lot of problems. Spend on what makes you happy, not on what other people might think of you. Buy quality over quantity and always live below your means. When I first started as a nurse, I had a patient who was in his early 50s. I was his nurse for 3 days in a row and got to know him and his family relatively well. The background is him and his wife had saved all of their lives so they could retire early and comfortably, working pretty long hours and sacrificing experiences so they could eventually enjoy retirement. They had retired 6 months prior to his hospitalization and had bought a large house and an RV so they could travel across the USA. Shortly after retiring, he had started acting odd and they went in for a checkup. He was found to have a large glioblastoma and was given a life expectancy of about 7 months. He had already started having personality changes and the wife was in tears most of the time, at least when I had him. At the end of my shift on my last day, she gave me a hug and told me that she would have done things differently if she could. She said she wished she would have worked less and enjoyed life more rather than always looking forward. She whispered, "All the money in the world doesn't matter if you don't have anyone to spend it with." I remember seeing his obituary a few months later, but the moment really stuck with me. My wife and I are saving a lot now, but we're making sure not to restrict ourselves too much because who knows? Life is too darn short. Even though it really sucks that guy died before he could use the money or do whatever the hell they wanted to do together, I think it's probably good to know that at least, your significant other is going to live relatively comfortably with the money that you saved, even if you can't enjoy it with them. It's a balance. It's very important to save money and invest early if you want to retire at a reasonable age. This doesn't have to mean living like a hermit. Learning to be more resourceful, less spendthrifty, and more self-reliant is not only great on the wallet, but I have found to be very rewarding. I'm scraping by in my mid-30s, had little extra income in my 20s that I used to travel and see things. Probably could have paid off my car with it, but I don't regret it at all. I could never have had the experiences I did and met the people I did if I had waited until I was 60, and I would have missed learning about the world and different cultures that has shaped who I am today. If you have the chance to do something, take it. We're all going to die and we're all getting old. Make experiences to make life fulfilling and worth living. You won't need to travel as much when you're old, weak, tired, and no fun. Old people who have lived full lives are happy. Those who haven't are miserable. I think I'm just going to refer to the other things and be like, no, you can still have fun and, spend your money wisely. You probably should have paid your car off, to be honest. But whatever. I was always worried about balancing the present with the future when it came to money. The odds are very good that you will live to a retirement age, so not preparing for it is foolish. That being said, it's no fun going through life only preparing for the future and not living when you're young and capable of doing so much. My solution, start a 401k type account as soon as you start your career. If there's a company match, ramp up the percentage to get the full match ASAP. Every time you get a raise, increase your contribution by 1%. Hopefully, your raise is more than 1% and you will still see an increase in net pay. Never touch that money. Roll it over if you change jobs. Invest somewhat aggressively since you're in it for decades. No need to be timid. I topped out at 12%, but with pensions pretty much gone, 15 to 20% is more realistic. Most people don't understand the concept of compounding interest. The first few decades might not seem that impressive, but the last decade of your savings can amount to a crap load of money. Not necessarily about this topic. My first roommate at med school in the Caribbean was a nice guy who studied real hard. Never drank. I forced him to come out and party maybe once. He finished everything without taking any breaks. He got accepted to a great residency program with a dual specialty a few weeks before his 23rd birthday. I spoke with him around the time, and he had a head full of gray hair and put on a lot of weight from not working out. He said he felt like he was about to turn 43, and he looked like it too. He absolutely regretted not hanging out a little more while the rest of us looked up to him and his work ethic. It really is as simple as find a healthy balance. I mean, I am more the person that spent money on trips, going places, and doing things, but as I get older, I'm getting to that point where I'm like, yeah, it's time I start buckling down and putting my money in, investments and all that stuff to try and, get ready for the future. Parents, what is the most shocking thing you've heard, witnessed, or experienced upon meeting your child's new boyfriend or girlfriend? He recounted the story of when he drove home so drunk he lost a tire hitting something, then drove on the rim for at least 4 miles down the interstate. Thankfully, he's sober now, but is that something you want to talk about first time you meet me? Ex-girlfriend's mom greeted me with, "Did you convince my daughter to go on birth control so you could do her?" I was shocked to say the least because we had only been dating for a few weeks and she was a virgin. I wasn't pushing the issue because I really liked her. In my confused state, the GF at the time explained to me that she told her mom she wanted to do it with me and needed birth control. First encounter with her mom, and I never recovered from that. She hated me. A quote from my dad. "I didn't expect her to be black. Nothing negative, both my parents just didn't see it coming. When I was 16, I met this girl who went to high school across town through a buddy who was dating her friend. Our parents were pretty liberal and we spent most of our weekends getting high and drunk in the pool house and swimming when we wanted to cool off. Needless to say, it took about 3 days before I lost my V-card to this girl, and it was the awesomest. Here's the thing, when you're 16 and you find a girl who is DTF, you never let that go. I was immediately her boyfriend, despite the fact that I didn't know that much about her. I knew everything that I needed to know. She had a female port and she let me put my male port in it. Week 2 of this torrid romance, and something isn't quite right in the land down under. It was really burning when I took a wee, like every time. I went to Catholic school, so I knew all about how Satan invades extramarital SX and fills your lust pole with STDs. I knew I had one. The only question was which one. A lot of people asked, wait, this girl gave you an STD? You dumped her, right? Let me refer to the previous statement. I was 16 and she was letting me do it with her. We only got more serious, like getting close to meet the parents serious, but love didn't cure whatever evil was festering in my pants, and I had to schedule a doctor's appointment. In the exam room, I had to fess up to my doctor, who I'd always suspected of secretly being gay. My terrible suspicions that I had third-degree wee-wee rot with a chance of AIDS. I had to pee in a cup and he manually examined my no-no area. He asked me why I suspected I had caught an STD, and in the spirit of doctor-patient confidentiality, I told him everything, which came out to, I met a random girl from across town and I've been doing it with her everywhere. Pools, bushes, suburbans, rugs, carpet, dirt piles. I don't know much about her, but if she's willing to do it with me, she's probably kind of a lady of the night. It took me a week, but the results came back. I had a benign UTI, most likely from bareback riding in dirt piles. Clean it up was his advice. That was the giant relief, and a big F you to Sister Helen, who had convinced me that God punishes all fornicators with a lifelong curse of phallic fire. Everything seemed to be great. The down under problems cleared up, and this girl and I kept seeing each other. After a few months, she invited me to her family dinner. Her mom was nice and pretty hot. Her dad was my doctor. I could leave it there just because I think the story ends where it should, but for those who want some Animal House style wrap-ups, here it is. All in all, it was super awkward because it took me a while, months, to believe that he wasn't just watching for the right time to confront me about it. I couldn't look him in the eyes, and I couldn't look her mom in the eyes because I was staring at her chest, convinced that he had told her. But it turned out that her dad was super cool. He never even mentioned anything other than telling me that I should start seeing a different doctor. He let me drive his super nice car, and they took me on family vacations. They even let me sleep over in the same room as their daughter. As for the girl, we dated through most of high school. She was a year younger than me, so we broke it off when I went to college. She actually went to the same college that I did, and we got back together for a little while, but it didn't work out. I implied she was a woman of loose morals, but I would like to rescind that comment. I'll admit, once I read the bit where it's like my doctor was her father, I didn't believe it. I mean, this latter bit, it helps kind of cement and pull it together a little bit, but I'm still on the fence about whether this is just a work of fiction. First time my mother met my high school girlfriend was walking into my bedroom with my girlfriend completely naked on the bed and me fully clothed on the computer. Nothing out of the ordinary here. I was the girlfriend in question. I'd come over to my long-distance relationship boyfriend's apartment on the way out of town. I had dressed in a plaid skirt, fishnets, combat boots, and a low cut, black tank because I wanted to leave him with a good memory. Things are getting saucy, downright dirty even, when suddenly his dad comes in. He'd come by early to take him to lunch and drop him at his job. I was absolutely mortified during the entire lunch with his dad, dad's girlfriend, and my boyfriend. I never thought I would strike a teenager until I saw a boy smack my daughter's butt in front of me with impunity. And I think any man or father would agree that you had every right to do so. My boyfriend in high school was a senior at a different school. I was a sophomore. At their school homecoming game, it was a tradition for all seniors to dress up in camouflage. So my mom first met him when he was dressed head to toe in black and white camouflage and wasn't aware of the tradition. As he was walking towards us, she said, "Oh, God, no," and didn't realize I'd heard her. To be fair, he was pure scum. As if coming out to my parents wasn't already shocking news, I told them a year later that I'm dating someone who's only a couple of years younger than my parents, and that I'm only interested in dating men far older than my age. We've been together for almost 5 years, married just 2 months ago, and my parents are now very accepting of us both. Strangely, they were more bummed out about me being gay than our age difference. Let's see, this goes back to 2007. First time my now ex-wife and I had met in person. Long-distance relationships are less socially stigmatic now than they were 7 years ago, but 5 years together, 2 of them married, were too much, and so she's my ex-wife. So we're sitting in a hotel watching an excellent post-coital episode of Burn Notice. Great frickin' show, yeah? Of course. When her phone rings, she picks it up, it's her mom. She says some things I really didn't understand at the moment because they seemed like gibberish, and they sighed and handed the phone to me, and this is the first thing I've ever heard this woman say, "Do you have a gun pointed at my daughter?" I fell over laughing. She'd worked out a code with her mom some years before when she left to go to college to have something like a safe word so that her mom could call the cops and save her. I actually think that's a great idea for people who have that kind of lifeline. That is a great idea, but imagine if that person is just not on point, doesn't remember the phrase or like what the topic is that you're supposed to say if you're in trouble, and they're just like, okay, why are you talking about this stuff? What? That'd be awkward, to say the least. I'm way too late to the game here, but that's all right. My grandfather graduated high school at 14 and started med school at 16. When he went on his first date with my grandmother while he was 16 and my grandmother was 14, he had to wait downstairs with her father as she finished getting ready. So my great-grandfather starts asking him all sorts of questions. Mainly, what does he do with his time? So my grandpa gives him the rundown. "Well, I'm 16, I'm captain of the basketball team, I'm in med school right now, sir." My great-grandfather told him that he wouldn't have his 14-year-old daughter date a liar since there was no way he was 16 and in med school and the captain of the basketball team. He thought he was either lying about his age or lying about being in med school to impress him, so he kicked my grandpa out. My grandpa's mom had to call my grandma's dad to verify his story before my great-grandfather would let him come back to the house to take my grandma. Not me, but my oldest sister, then 19, asked if she could bring her boyfriend of a few months to my dad's 45th birthday meal. They said yes, and we were all excited to meet him. They were both over 30 minutes late, and the guy turned out to be a kid my dad was neighbors with and used to play with as a child. He spent the rest of the meal making jokes about how they knew each other as kids, and now he was boning his kid, and that they'd know the entire time about the connection and not bothered to give us any prior warning because they thought it would be funnier for my dad to find out this way. No idea how my dad managed to keep his cool. Some people just have zero class whatsoever. Not really on topic, but this is one for the parents who make snap judgments about kids' choices of who they date. This all started when I was 18. I'm now 30. I just graduated EMT training and was out with some friends celebrating, and this beautiful girl that had been in the nursing program at our school started chatting me up. I had spoken to her a few times at school, mostly hi, how are you, etc. Well, we ended up going on a few dates, mostly just dinners and movies, the usual, and she asks if I want to come with her to her family cookout. Well, obviously I said sure, why not, and went to meet her family. I'll pause here to add that at the time I was 329 pounds, so not a small guy, and I'm 6'5". However, I had also lost almost 100 pounds before going to school with her, which she did not know at this point. I fought a thyroid disorder all through middle and high school and worked my butt off to get my weight under control and find the right medication so I wasn't just a fat lazy bum as some might call me. I knew from some of our conversations that this girl was really into physical fitness and the like. I told her that I was going to the gym and trying to lose at least 100 pounds, and she seemed encouraging and offered to even go with me. Well, the weekend cookout comes along and I meet the parents. We get there and everyone's outside cooking out and enjoying the pool, etc. I've never had body image issues or problems with my man boobs, so I take off my shirt and join in after meeting the parents and having what I thought was a good first talk. I noticed while I'm sitting talking to one of her relatives, I think it was was her uncle that she's giving me these weird looks. Well, about an hour later, I ask someone where the bathroom is, and when walking in the house to find it, I overhear this girl and her father talking in the kitchen. I'm not usually one to spy on someone, but I couldn't help myself. I figured the dad was telling her I wasn't good for her or something. I was right on both accounts. What I heard was, I didn't spend my life working hard and sending you to private school and buying you anything you desired so you could end up with some fat slob piece of crap like that out there. He has zero respect for himself. How can you expect him to respect you? Well, I was a little annoyed at this point, so I figured I'd back out and leave and call her later and see how she wanted to handle this, if we needed to call it quits or what. Before I could turn around though, I hear her reply, I only brought him home to make you and mom mad. I find him disgusting, but it's worth it to let you know you can't tell me what to do. Yeah, at this point, I'm really angry. Upon hearing this, I walk into the kitchen and let my feelings be known. I informed her dad that yes, I'm fat, but that I was 430 pounds just a year and a half ago and still losing weight. And sorry I wasn't born with perfect genes that made me fit and perfect in his eyes. But as he stated, he worked hard to provide for his daughter. I worked damn hard to overcome my challenges and will continue to work on them. After that, I turned to the daughter and said I was glad I could be her token fat guy for the day, and if she'd pack me a few racks of ribs, I'd take my fat, happy butt home. Fast forward about 12 years and I had gone back to school and graduated with my paramedic certs. I'm at this time about 230 pounds. I'm still a big dude, but a lot of it's muscle now, and I just have a large frame to begin with. Well, I was on the ambulance and received a call for a patient in cardiac arrest. Went en route, hit the lights, and hauled butt to the call. Upon arriving to the scene, we are directed to the patient, and I honestly stopped dead in my tracks as I came round the corner and realized the patient was the girl's dad. After about a 2-second, well, doesn't life work in mysterious ways pause, I immediately began intubating him, and my partner got our monitor set up while a fire crew member takes over compression. We work him for about 3 or so minutes on scene and decide to move him to the truck. Once loaded and en route to the ER, I continued working on him in the box. After about another 4 minutes, I finally got a shockable rhythm and proceed to try and jumpstart his heart. Takes about 4 rounds, but finally get his heart in a normal sinus rhythm and get him to the ER. I turned him over to the docs and went back in service, just thinking about how much of a female dog karma was that Mr. Fit had a heart attack when I was the fat slob piece of crap, and how ironic it was that I'd be the one to respond to that call. Well, about a week later, I get a call from the hospital that a patient I brought in wants to thank me. After learning it was this gentleman, and he donates a large sum of money to the hospital, and getting the PR speech from the suits at the hospital, I'm thinking this is going to end bad. I made my way over to the hospital after a shift, and when I got to his room, I realized when I walk in he has zero memory of me. Not surprising since it was so long ago, but I have also changed a lot physically. He thanks me, I do the usual, it's just my job speech, etc. Well, I was thinking, cool, got past this, no drama, it's over, all good, not so fast. He proceeds to tell me it's frustrating that even guys like us in good physical shape that take care of themselves can still have heart attacks while there's people out there that eat anything they want, weigh God knows what, and still walk around with luck. That really ticked me off, but I held it for a while and said, yeah, but that's just the way life is, and try to work my way out of there. Just as I'm about to cut and run, it hits me. What can I say without being a total butt and really ticking off the doctors outside? As I'm walking out, I tell him, glad I could help him out, and it's not bad work for a guy who used to be a fat slob piece of crap. I turned around and walked out, but I noticed that little light of recognition in his eyes as I left. That was about 6 months ago, and I've received several messages from him since then wanting to meet and talk, but I've ignored them, as I really have no desire to hear what he has to say. At best, it's an apology for how he acted back then. At worst, he'll try and take me to task for being a butt to him, and I'm good without it either way. Moral, I guess, is always treat others how you want to be treated, as someday you may need them, or something like that. Words to live by, but you also can't hold on to crap that people have said to you over the years, because yeah, while it might be good when, if maybe you do get revenge or an opportunity to prove yourself to that person and show them that they were wrong about you, sure, that's good. But if you let it fester and you're thinking on these things that happened like years and years ago, like all the time, it can twist you up inside, no joke. My ex-boyfriend dropped a bag of booger sugar on on the floor. He told my dad it was sugar because he was diabetic. My dad promptly told him to leave and never come back. That was the nice way I put it. He was not that nice. My mom didn't say a word, not the best time to say, "But Daddy, I love him," on my part, and then he asked me if I was on the booger sugar too. Not a parent, but my girlfriend met my mother last year for the first time. After my mother had a long discussion with us about the seriousness of texting and driving due to some news program she watched, my mom just drops the serious talk and starts casual conversation with her. First thing she asks is, "Do you have any siblings?" To which my girlfriend responded, "I had a sister, but she died in a car crash." Now, this was a complete joke, but my mom is not the humorous type. I literally cringed so hard. Not gonna lie, sounds like your girlfriend had a pretty good sense of humor. Started seeing who is now my ex-wife when after about a month and a half of dating, we got pregnant with our daughter. Met her and her parents at a restaurant for dinner to tell them that she was pregnant and what our plans would be going forward. Her father looks at me and the first thing he said was, "Darling 74, why did you have sex with my daughter?" Mind you, she was 21 at the time and I was 24. After a few seconds, I replied, "She took off her shirt and asked me if I was going to do her or not. So I did, followed by me immediately getting up and walking right out of the restaurant. Me, my ex-girlfriend, and her sister's friend were sitting outside on the back step getting ready to smoke the devil's lettuce. Her dad had recently left for a couple of weeks, and before he left, he said to me, "Don't do anything that you wouldn't do if I was around," and told him I would behave. Anyways, we're outside and her mom was at work, or so we thought. So I take the bowl and smoke, and her sister's friend goes, "Ah, crap." I turn around and there is my ex's mom staring at me with eyes of fury. As a punishment, she made me and my ex-girlfriend watch Pinocchio, and she grounded her for like a month. Anyone else heard that Snoop Dogg's apparently quit smoking the devil's lettuce? I'm waiting for that to be some kind of like campaign for some new product or something that he's making, I don't know. During my angsty phase, I brought home a guy with a safety pin through his eyebrow and a foot-tall blue mohawk. Within 5 minutes of entering my household, he managed to insult my mother's interior decorating skills and shoot my little sister in the eye point blank with a Nerf gun. We left before he could even meet my father, who would surely have ended up in prison for whatever he did to the dude. Happened to a uni mate. He went to pick up his girlfriend from the parents. They had been dating for a few weeks, and this was their first time meeting. Her house was on a reasonable hill, and while parking, he rolled back into the dad's car. So in his first few sentences to the parents, he had to explain that he had damaged their car, apologize, and then convince them to let their daughter get in his car to go to a movie. They let her go, and it became a running joke with the family. My family is very chill. Poop is discussed while eating and such. With this in mind, my 16-year-old brother brought home a fairly good-looking girl, tall, smiled a lot, outgoing, older. One of the first conversations we all have together after they go to his room to fool around is how they met 2 days before off of Tinder and only got together so that they could fool around for the summer before she left for college. Then proceeded to ask my mom to provide her with birth control as her mother would not. That happened. Talk about inappropriate dinner conversation. Also, there is a startling amount of people that aren't parents like talking about this stuff. It's all just kids talking about how their dates disappointed their parents. In my early 20s, after getting kicked out of college, I lived with my parents. The way their house is set up is a big staircase down, basically, in the middle of the house, which is almost completely open. There are no hallways in the house. Anyways, at the bottom of the staircase is the kitchen with an opening from where the sink is. Well, my mom has some weird sixth sense when she knows I have a girl over, and it is never the same one. This would typically happen on weekends. My mom would be washing dishes and yelling my name saying, "Come down for breakfast." Only problem is there's a random girl in my room. 90% of the time the chick would freak the hell out and be like, "Holy crap, how am I going to get out of here without meeting this woman?" My mom doesn't care one bit. In fact, she invited them to join us for breakfast. Sometimes I'd walk the girl down and say, "Hey, this is blah blah blah," but sometimes I'd send them down by themselves and they'd just dart out of the front door. God damn, those moments were frickin' priceless. My 17-year-old daughter had been talking to a friend of a friend on Facebook. He was supposedly in the army, just finished basic, and was at a base in Texas. One Friday night, he showed up at our house. We live in Missouri. He flew in to surprise her. She was surprised. I was mad. Asked him how long he was in town, where he was trying to stay. The punk kid used all of his money to buy his one-way plane ticket and take a cab to our house. I ended up driving this kid back to the airport, buying a plane ticket for him, and sending him back on his merry way. Turns out, he thought he would just not go back to his base and live at our house until my daughter finished high school. Yeah, not happening. She is 25 now, and we were just laughing about this last week when she and her husband were having dinner with us. That was one crazy, scary guy.
Yeah, I got a hard agree there. That sounds like a kind of terrifying event to happen in your life, some random dude showing up. Especially some weirdo that's just been casually chatting with your daughter for I don't know how many months.
My girlfriend, now wife, met my parents for the first time at my dad's surprise 60th. In her nervousness, she proceeds to get plastered and is repeatedly shushed by my mother during speeches for laughing too loud and long with my mom's friends. The next morning, she's hating life as she comes downstairs for breakfast. My older brother, who has the maturity of a 13-year-old boy, sees her in distress and proceeds to wave a platter of eggs and bacon under her nose. As she bolts for the bathroom, my mom, who has a long career in addiction fields, pulls me into the hallway and asks me, does she do this a lot? A less than auspicious entry into my family. First time I met my ex's dad, we were sitting in front of the TV. Me, him, her, and her two younger sisters, and we were watching Hannah Montana. Just for the record, he turned to me and asked, "Are you sleeping with my daughter?" I replied awkwardly, I'm not sure, We totally were. Turned towards my ex and asked, are we sleeping together? She casually answered, not taking her eyes off of the TV, "Yes, Daddy, we're sleeping together." Direct. Confident, I presume. All good traits. What happened?
Escape room employees, what was the weirdest escape tactic you've seen? I've learned not to make the final stage a lock with a key because damn if I haven't met some of the best lockpicks in the state. My family did an escape room and there was a room with a phone that connected to 3 other rooms. The door only opened when you dialed the right numbers on the phone, and so my sister just walked up and pressed redial and the last door opened. We have the record of 7.5 minutes to complete the room. My brother and I once got out of a room by taking a magnet from the previous puzzle and using it to lift a key out of a small opening in a lockbox. There were 6 of us and nobody could figure out the last clue, so we improvised. Got out with 3 minutes to spare. Pretty good, kid. I was told this by an employee. There were paper clips to unlock handcuffs. Someone stuck it into a functioning outlet. I don't think that guy was trying to speed run the escape room. Not an employee, but did a room with 2 friends where we got randomly placed with a family with 3 kids under the age of 12. The youngest was maybe 7. We were like, oh man, we're not going to get any help at all. Kids won't be able to solve anything, and their parents will have to keep track of them. But there was this one part where you had to solve a puzzle that would allow you to move a bookshelf on treads. There was a small gap through which you could see the key, but it was too small to get more than a few fingers through. Unless you're a small 7-year-old boy. He just popped his arm in there and grabbed the key. We bypassed a good 5 minutes of the room that way. Also, the kids ended up being delightful and pretty good at finding stuff. There was a group of people who were doing a space-themed escape room. In one of the rooms there was an astronaut suit, which was supposed to just serve as a prop, but one of the members thought that it might be needed to solve one of the rooms. So he ended up traversing through the entire escape room while wearing an astronaut suit. And no, it wasn't needed to solve anything. No joke, this is actually making me want to try an escape room. We had a room where you were supposed to translate this code into different words. We had a list of possible words, and then put them into a specific order. We weren't positive how to use the code translator. It was something with wheels, so instead we just used some common sense, like XCWWB is obviously going to be green, not purple. But the lock that was supposed to pop open when you got it right had already popped when we got in, so nothing happened. We asked for a clue and she made us use the actual code wheel because she assumed there was no way we could have gotten the words right without it. I worked at an escape room for about a year, but one group managed to always stay in my mind. It was a group of 4 women, maybe in their 50s, drunk out of their minds. They started off the room quite well with a pace that would allow them to escape, but then they encountered what we considered to be the easiest puzzle in the room. Basically, they get a long magnet and use it to pull a key out of a locked window. However, they, for some god-unknown reason, could not figure this out. After a bit of trying, they asked for a clue. I don't remember exactly what I said, but it was something along the lines of, remember that magnet stick you guys got? Some might call it the key to success. Simultaneously, they all sigh, which is a common reaction when people realize that an answer to a puzzle was so simple, but
No, they didn't understand the clue. Instead, they shoved the book into the window in hopes of getting the key, which is something we specifically tell them not to do. Had to end up pulling them from the room as they started ripping apart the books. At a certain point, I am just sat here wondering, how much worse could I be than some of these people at these escape rooms? Working at an escape room, I have a lot of stories, but this one will forever be my favorite. It happened a little over a year ago now. A guy was wearing a baseball cap when he went into the room, and shortly after took it off and placed it somewhere. About 7 to 10 minutes later, he picked it up and started searching it for clues or hidden messages. His wife needed to remind him that was his own hat, and it actually took some convincing. He really didn't believe her at first. I work at an escape room in Sweden, and we use live actors in our games. One time when one of my colleagues entered in character, a group of people decided to grab him and tickle him so that he would let them out, because they thought that was a great tactic. Worst part is that when they got out the normal way, they were very proud of their actions and thought they were really funny. I abhor being tickled, so much, so I have a lot of sympathy for that worker. I'd be so angry too, you're just trying to do your job and a bunch of people start tickling you. Surely there are rules and regulations to these things. It's hey, don't bother the actors that we have working at this place, please. Our rooms had a lot of decorative touches, lots of pretty knickknacks just to enhance the mood. One of our rooms had a Victorian parlor, smoking room feel, and on the mantel was a small statue of a bird of some sort. One gentleman decided to pick up and carry the eagle for about 45 minutes. But guys, this eagle has to be for something. He tried placing it on things, opening it, using it as a key. Thank goodness he didn't try to use it to bang something open. When the group finally escaped, he was at the door and quickly asked me, "What was the eagle for?" "Oh, nothing. It's just for a decoration." He had done absolutely nothing to help his group progress. So he walks over and sets the statue down and lets out a heavy sigh. He seemed absolutely crushed. Meanwhile, the rest of his group was partying and celebrating their success. I get that. That is the worry, that you go to one of these things with a bunch of friends and no matter what you do, how hard you try, you end up contributing nothing to the team. That would be awful. I feel for this dude. I have tons of stories about destructive players, so instead, how about a weird and actually intelligent method? After my brief and video, the players started to run around the room, all talking out loud, not necessarily talking to each other. I thought that there was no way they were going to escape with how disorganized they were. Boy, was I wrong. One of the group members shouts, "Pump a nickel," and everyone else shuts up immediately. They continued to play like this through the rest of the game. Whenever one of them had either found something interesting or figured out an answer, they would shout, "Pump a nickel," and immediately everyone else would give them their full attention. They got out in 30 minutes and 0 clues in a room with a 20% success rate, and average time to complete is 45 to 50 minutes. Definitely one of the better groups I've managed or seen. I worked on one where a roulette table was one of the answers. Now, we didn't want to rig a roulette wheel, so we gave the lock multiple answers. Now, this family comes through and plays it and gets double zeros, and they assume it's rigged to land on double zeros. Pretty common assumption. They spin it again, lands on double zeros again. I worked there for about a year, and I don't think I'll ever see something like that again. The family didn't make it out of the room, but they were extremely close. I had a friend who ran an escape room in an older house. She said she had a group that snuck in tools and disassembled the furniture looking for clues, namely a metal child's bed and rocker. She had another group that peeled off a layer of wallpaper and punched a hole through the drywall. I also went through with a friend who tore a stuffed animal in half to remove it from a locked box instead of finding the key. Hearing about these, I wish they would do crazy stuff like that. Let's insert a key in a teddy bear or something like that. That'd be cool, I guess. I mean, you gotta consider that you can't go around breaking all this crap, right? An employee told us this story. The room we went to was part of an older building, and there was an unused fireplace. A previous lady had opened the chimney flue, letting a dead bird, among other things, into the room. This lady thought the dead bird was part of the escape, and the employees had to inform her that it wasn't. I've built 2 escape rooms which we ran at conferences and events, guaranteed occurrences. 1. Someone rips something apart due to overenthusiasm. 2. Someone rips something apart because they came in drunk. 3. The meekest, quietest person in the group figures a puzzle out 20 minutes before everyone else and nobody is listening to them. 4. The smartest people never figure anything out. Hot tip, if you're going to be in an escape room, pretend you're dumb as poop. We never require you know advanced chemistry or have an IT background. All the pieces are in the room. If your first few guesses on a puzzle aren't it, don't sit there beating your brain on it. Hand it to fresh eyes.
5. Someone does the opposite of what the warning label says. If it's shaped like a laser pointer and has a giant do not point at eyes, guess where it's immediately going. 6. Since we show at conferences and take over other spaces, we don't have 100% control of this space. We will hang black curtains over things or put a label on something that says not part of the puzzle, and people still, with almost every run through, find something new. Like there was a label on an AC vent high on the ceiling and somebody spent half an hour going, what does it mean? 7. Someone figures a puzzle out that spells out a clue, notices the clue, then disassembles it and forgets it. This behavior I do not understand. We had one puzzle where people had to connect strings to a point on a grid, and when all the strings were up, it spelled a 3-letter word. Groups would do this, notice the word, comment on it, then take all the strings off the wall. Then 10 minutes later, be going, this lock needs 3 letters to open it, and I'm screaming from the security camera room. 8. I built a puzzle that has a 30-second timer. If you don't solve the whole thing in that time frame, it resets. Once you know what to do, it's just button pushing. It's easy, but holy Christ, having a short time limit stresses some people out like crazy. Like screaming, it's gonna reset, oh god, at their teammates. That's just people getting real into the game. I mean, hell, me and my mates yell at each other when we play Mario Kart. We curse each other's names, but pretty sure that's typical of a regular Mario Kart game. Emotions get pretty high. Work in an escape room and we have a prison scenario. Shocker, I know. Set in the 1960s in Germany. Made to look authentically old, there is an old rusty toilet, obviously without water. Via the cameras, I could only see the back of the dude appearing to investigate the water tank above the toilet, only he wasn't. You might already guess where we're heading. This dude thought it was perfectly appropriate to wee into a prop toilet in a confined space. With 3 friends present in the same room, I lost my crap and had to throw the group out. There was a drawer that would activate a black light when you pulled it open. Group was pretty dumb and clueless, gave them a hint. You'll find something useful if you open a certain drawer. Naturally, they find the drawer and someone decides that it would be useful to grab the light bulb and rip it out of its socket. Entire room blacked out cause they tripped the fuse. Needless to say, they did not escape. In a clown-themed escape room with my friends, we found a coin which we found out was used later on in the room. There was a hole in the floor with a note that said, do not put the coin in this hole. We thought it was a trick or something, so we put the coin in there, only for nothing to happen, and we couldn't get the coin out. With all the notes and warnings that employees apparently put around the place, or have to say because otherwise people trash the rooms apparently, this doesn't sound quite as fun as I imagined. Former employee here. We always reminded our guests to be gentle and respectful inside our games. That force of any kind is entirely unnecessary. People have ripped handcuffs from tables and walls, used incredible force to rip open mag-locked doors, somehow used a key from their own keychain to unlock a cupboard that is not meant to be unlocked at all. There is a phone in one of the games that cannot make any outgoing calls except to 911. There is a note on the phone asking people not to call 911, and we reminded our guests not to call 911, but it constantly happened. It was rare when it happened, but some kind of parallel thinking that led them to getting the right answer without any of the clues. It's pretty alarming when a door opens and it required a clue in another locked box. In the escape room I work at, I once had a party of older 20-somethings come in during a day out. They didn't pay much attention. I think some of them might have been a bit drunk, but I'm not sure, but they worked at a pretty good pace. In the room they were doing, they had to find a crank, a gear, and a handle in order to open a mechanical box that had the answer to the mystery they were trying to solve. We weren't allowed to lock the door for safety reasons, so before they even step in the room, I gave them a whole spiel about the rules and whatnot, and told them that anything that looks like it needs more parts to work probably does, so please don't force things. This box clearly has a part for the gear, and a part for the crank to attach to said gear on the side of the box. After finding the gear and handle, but having not found the crank yet, one of the dudes in the room just attaches the gear and with sheer force of his grip, turns it without the crank and opens the box. I was just staring at the monitor open-mouthed in awe. I haven't seen anything before or after that could possibly top that experience. They ended up deciding to continue the room and try to find the crank after I informed them what happened, and they'd technically solved the room and had a blast. This is our extended list at work, basically meaning that people have done this crap at our venue and now we have to brief everyone with this list. Ceiling tiles and sprinklers are not part of the game. Do not not kick holes in our walls. We do not keep clues in the plaster. Do not pull apart our phone. It is there for clues from the staff. It is not a clue itself. Climbing on top of our shelving and jumping onto a lockbox to break it open is not how you solve a puzzle. Kicking doors down is not permitted in gameplay. You are not Arnold Schwarzenegger. Do not place metal items in the power outlets. They are live and will kill you. These are the types of people who look at us with surprise on their faces when we have to repeat they are liable for the damages they make. I'm starting to wonder if some of these contestants got confused between an escape room with a rage room, I think they're called. You know, you can just like go in there and break whatever's in there with whatever you like. It's supposed to be really good for like an anger outlet. Last week, a woman ripped a very large painting out of the wall. It was clearly marked "Do Not Touch" and screwed into the wall with anchors. One part of our game requires you to look up information in a textbook. We give the page number to help solve a puzzle. I've had 2 groups now waste 5 to 10 minutes solving the practice problem instead. Didn't know you could pick combination locks until a guy did it. If there is any kind of lock anywhere in an escape room, I can guarantee someone has tried to pick it. Drunk people in particular get pretty creative, usually not in ways that are beneficial to them. At least once a week we have someone ask if they can just make their way through the drywall. I know it's a joke, but I always keep a closer eye on those people. But we have our customers lock up their belongings in lockers prior to entering the rooms. It's important to note that the lockers are not assigned per room. Any player can pick any locker. The other day I had a group open up a locker cabinet which has the means to escape in it within the first 2 minutes in the room, and escaped right away. When I asked them how they escaped, fearing that we forgot to lock it during the reset, they let me know that they used their locker key to open it. Needless to say, we got new locks for our lockers. God, my boyfriend works in an escape room, and they tell you at the beginning, if you have to use force, then it's not meant to move. Then people literally rip lights, bookshelves, clocks, skeletons that were drilled into the walls right off. I think they spend close to a few $1,000s a month repairing crap they told customers not to do. That sounds ludicrously frustrating if you were the business owner of that establishment. I had one team shut the magnetic secret door behind them, locking themselves in for no reason that was particularly dumb. In one of our rooms, there's an opening in the wall for a long tube that they're supposed to stick a magnet into and fish out a key. One team decided to drop the cryptex they were trying to open into it instead. That was fun to try and get out. One team of the 2 got to the end of the hour time limit without even solving the first puzzle. In another room, we have a mannequin hanging from a noose. My coworker watched one particular idiot put the noose around his own neck and climb onto the bench next to it. He got a real shouting at over the walkie-talkie for that moronic stunt. This job sounds like, I don't know, the second most infuriating jobs after maybe working in the stock market. A group came into this place and I went through everything. I was the only employee who was fluent in English, so I'd go through the rules. The rest of the staff are Russian and mostly speak Russian. Only one knows broken English, so she'd relay stuff to me if needed. Well, one day, as I said, this group came in. My boss and her friend, who were visiting, were discussing in high-speed Russian different parts of the escape room, how to get in and out and such. I assume no one can hear or understand them, so I go through the rules and such. I mention I'm also on a loudspeaker and such if they need help. The second they get in the first room, a guy goes, "You guys remember how I speak Russian? Want to set a record? I can hear you." Niet! Not necessarily an escape tactic, but when telling the group the rules and what to do, i.e. don't go in the ceiling, they almost always think you're just trying to misdirect them. Please do not, under any circumstances, mess with the fire detection and alarm system. Somehow translates to, there is definitely something hiding in the functioning smoke detector. They were not happy with the bill for the fire department getting called after they ripped it out of the ceiling. If I go to an escape room and ever do something this stupid, I'm probably going to come back on here and be like, well, I did it. I fell victim to my own stupidity and I paid for it. All of my judgments of other people in this specific topic were unfounded and, well, I was no better. There was one person who ripped the wires out of a pressure sensor, then stuck said wires into an electrical outlet, shorted out the room, and no, they did not get out. In his defense, he knew a lot about electricity. In high school, I used to work in an escape room for my co-op. I usually just watched cameras and swept up the room after everyone was done. In our medieval room, there is a ventilation hatch really high up on the ceiling
ceiling. It's really out of sight, but if you're looking for it, you can find it. I've witnessed 6 full-grown guys form a human ladder to try and open the hatch with a bobby pin they found on the floor because they thought it was part of the room. I had to send in my colleague before any of them got hurt, though. Hey guys, I've got an idea of how we can escape this medieval-themed escape room. See that modern-day ventilation shaft up there? I bet that's the way we get out. Worked at an escape room while I was between jobs. We had a room that had a long vase glued to a table with a key at the bottom. There was a stick magnet located in the room, but one of the first things people usually found was the other magnets utilized in another part of the room. This person took off a shoe, completely pulled the laces out, and tied it to the small magnet to stick down the long vase. Creative, but completely unnecessary. Plus, then it was super confusing when they did eventually find the long magnet stick. I guess that's the issue with these things. People find stuff, get so excited that they found a clue or potential answer for how to get out of the place, and they want to use it immediately. So then they're like, wait a minute, but it doesn't quite work. Maybe they expect us to use our brains even more and think outside of the box. Like, I understand that. It's kind of like, I know, going on a tangent, but it's like when I first played Dark Souls. I went straight to the graveyard, tried to go all the way into the catacombs, was just like, this is the way I need to go. Of course it is, because the game's supposed to be super freaking hard. And then I took another look around and found the stairway to the Undead Burg, and it was way easier, and I was like, oh, well, now I just feel silly. You know, there's the expectation of what you know about something vaguely, and then there's the reality of the matter. Escape room employee here. I have witnessed a few of these, but most have been told to me by co-workers. Picking a lock with a girl's bobby pin. We provide a key. Thought they had played the room before and were cheating, prying a threaded bolt off the wall with their bare hands, shouting the answer into the camera, the game mic, or writing it on paper provided and blocking our camera with it, instead of, doing the puzzle in real life. We cannot physically lock our rooms due to fire code, so people try to leave the room and come back with power tools we have in our lobby, from room construction and maintenance. There's a 7 to 8 foot armoire in one room. We've had to get people off the top from it before, and this is again after telling them repeatedly that everything they need to interact with is eye level or lower. Writing on the clues we slide under the door and asking questions, and most stupidly, sticking metal objects into power outlets. Those of you who don't have a degree and love your job, what do you do? I walk dogs. Everyone at work is always super stoked to see me, and I never go home angry. Already a strong start. I drive a school bus, and my elementary school kids are my favorite part of the day. I make $14 an hour and work 2.5 hours at a time and get paid for 6 hours a day unless I do a field trip or something. And most of the time, those are fun as hell. I get to go to the zoo, the science center. I went to a Cardinals game. I went to a swimming competition and got to stay in a nice hotel for a weekend, getting paid the entire time. The only thing I would change about my job are the buttholes I have to share the road with. I'm a web developer. I dropped out of college to move home and take care of my mom. Motorcycle accident, permanent severe brain damage. I couldn't leave home. I had to be with my mom, so I did what I used to do for fun. PHP. I hated PHP though, so I researched what the most semantic and elegant solution to web development was. The research led me to develop with Python and Django. I made a website, Good Guy Gamers, that wasn't successful at all. It was way too much work for one person. I'm a terrible designer and marketer, but I put everything I had into making the site have cool, unique features and demonstrate my skill. It worked. I landed a job where I work near full-time for a great company for $40 an hour, and I have a huge say in what happens. I can work for 3 hours a day if I'm feeling awful or can't focus for some reason, or I can work 12 hours a day busting my butt on an exciting problem. The main point is I found what I'm passionate about, and I found a company that truly appreciates what I can do. Further, they appreciate what I could become with more experience. Great rule when looking for a job: look for a place with upward momentum and a workplace that actively wants to see you improve. I'm an educator at a small zoo. Not very common in the zoo community to work without a degree, but I was lucky to be grandfathered in. I started as a temporary worker, went to full-time animal care, and worked my way up to lead keeper. Education was a normal part of my keeper job anyway, so I jumped at the chance to do that full-time. I'm at the 1-year mark now, and I'm crazy about it. Teaching people about wildlife and habitat conservation while handling awesome animals is very rewarding. That does sound pretty cool. Construction. Winter's a
tough, but fresh air is a blessing.
Bartender, the parties, the stories, and the money to be made.
I'm a professional farrier. I've only been at it a few months, went to farrier school straight out of high school, but I love it, and I wouldn't change a thing. Though a lot of people are surprised when an 18-year-old girl shows up and manhandles their stubborn stallions and nags. I'd heard the name farrier, but I didn't know what it was until I just read this. I'm an air traffic controller, 23 years old, and at any given moment I have hundreds of human beings on my screen. For the most part, pilots do their thing and we do ours. While I wish to pursue a business degree, I'm not sure I would trade this job for anything. Excellent income, excellent benefits, and the fact that every day is slightly different than the last is pretty cool. I feel like I'm gonna see some kind of bot story or something at some point where it's like, do this, join this, we need you. Kennel attendant for the cat building of a no-kill shelter. Every shift starts at 7 a.m. Depending on the shift, I scrub vomit, clean dusty litter paw prints off everything, clean cage units, change out bedding, dump hundreds of pounds of dirty cat litter, and lug hundreds of pounds of clean bagged litter, scrub 50-some dirty litter boxes. It's by far the most physical labor-intensive job I've ever had, and by far my favorite job I've ever had. I'm part-time, the pay is not enough to support myself, but by God, I love it. For reference, I'm 25, 1 year of community college, and 1 year of awful degree mill art school under my belt. I live in a fantasy world where how successful I see myself is dependent on how happy I am. I'm looking for a second part-time job and also procrastinating getting serious about a sketch pet portrait business. I'm a pretty simple girl who loves animals and wants to make a positive difference in the world. I wish you luck, I support you, but I will remain steadfastly pessimistic. I kid. Of course. Honestly, I enjoy the outlook on this young woman. I think it's good to feel like needed, wanted, or feel like you're at your station in life, you know, what you're meant to be doing, or at least something that makes you happy, and that's all that really matters, you know? I'm a 911 dispatcher. High school diploma is all that is required. I actually do have a degree in women's studies, but it in no way helped me get the job. The thing that got me the job was customer service experience. I worked at an answering service for 2 years before this. My job is fantastic. I work 12-hour shifts and only work 15 days a month. 1 week I work Monday to Tuesday, then Friday, Saturdays, and Sundays. The next week I only work Wednesday and Thursday. I get a 3-day weekend every other week. The work is interesting, but there's also loads of downtime in which we're allowed to browse the internet or read. There's no dress code, although pajamas are gently discouraged. Most importantly, you really do get to help people, so you leave at the end of your shift feeling like you've done something good for your community. It's fantastic. I work as a bus driver for people with disabilities. I love what I do because I feel like I'm giving back a little part of life these people had taken from them for whatever reason. It is very fulfilling. I love my clients. Mostly. I actually know quite a few people who worked with disabled people. Obviously I've heard good sides of it, and then I've heard absolute horror stories about the people who do not behave very well and some messed up stuff. I'm a welder or fabricator. It's almost always a one-man operation in my shop, which is good for me as a total introvert. I only get help moving and installing the really heavy pieces. I get to make custom steel pieces for custom houses. It feels great when the homeowner says I built all their favorite parts of their house, mostly handrails, furniture, doors, stairs, and all little odds and ends a modern house needs. I also get to do a little woodworking when it's needed. I'm a compliance analyst for a health insurance company. I started out as a clerk for my department and worked my way up to where I am now within 2 years. So now I'm responsible for making sure we're following federal regulations and perform audits on the work we do, in addition to assisting my manager with changes that need to take place. It's an amazing job. I love the company and my manager, and I'm lucky to know that I'm still not done moving up within the company with the growth we're experiencing. I'm a taxidermist. I love my job. It takes my 2 favorite classes from high school and smushed them together, biology and art. I also find taxidermy morbidly fascinating. I mean, has anyone ever seen that thing where it's I think a guy tried to taxidermy a lion but had never seen a lion before, so he had the skin and everything, and instead of making it look like a lion, it looked like one of those really bad paintings of what people thought a lion looked like by second-hand descriptions. If you haven't seen it, type in bad taxidermy lion, it looks ridiculous. But then look up medieval lion painting and you will know the one. I roughneck on a drilling rig, make great money, $2,500 a week, and I work only 2 weeks a month and 6 months out of the year. Practically buy whatever I want, whenever I want. There's a lot of fights between the men out here, but if you can get past that,
and do your job right, you're pretty much your own man out here. I myself have considered working on an oil rig at one time or another when things get stressful. I'm like, I hate it here, but I also need to make money. Senior network penetration tester and security researcher. I've wanted to do this stuff since I was 10 and tinkered with everything since then. Paycheck or not, I love it. I get to travel all over, hack into Fortune 500s and not get in trouble, not that they usually catch me, and meet some amazing people. I wouldn't trade it for anything. Musician. I perform and record my own songs with some of my best friends in the world, and sometimes these crazy high schools pay me to arrange crappy pop music into fun choral pop music for their show choirs. I'd live in a box to keep doing this if needed. I work at Disney World, and although there are good and bad days, there is nothing that compares to the environment. You meet some amazing people and see some crazy things. For every one negative experience, there are 1,000 positive experiences. You can work your way up, or you can stay where you love working. They give you a lot of chances to improve after making a mistake and opportunities to further yourself. There will always be people who can only see the negatives, but they don't really understand that the magic is making someone else's day, even if it means sacrificing your own.
Sounds like a bunch of propaganda to me.
I'm joking. I actually went to Disneyland a while ago, and I had a blast. Everyone was really lovely. The immersion, that Disney magic, I totally felt it. I had a great time. A little late to the conversation, but I work at a dog boarding facility that has it all. Grooming, daycare, boarding, obviously, self-service baths, fostering and rescue and adoption, the whole shebang. It's really fun to work with all of the different personalities and breeds of dogs, and can also be challenging learning how to work around behavior, trust issues that some of them come in with. It can be tiring, though the 4-hour shifts I work here leave me way more tired than the 8-hour shifts I used to work in retail. But in the end, it is totally worth being with dogs all day. The only issue I have with where I work are some of my co-workers, but thankfully management has a good head on their shoulders. Otherwise, I love where I work, and I hope to put in many more years. No qualifications, professional musician for 30 years. Wouldn't trade the worst year of being a pro muso for anything else. I love it that much. I have zero job security, no benefits apart from free alcohol, late nights, and sometimes recording sessions are booked early the following day. Long time away from home, traveling all the time, still wouldn't be doing anything else. That is the issue with not working for an almighty corporation or just being self-employed in general. You don't really know where your next paycheck's going to be coming from. I'm a personal shopper. I literally walk around a store all day collecting groceries to be delivered to people who are too rich and busy to do their own shopping. It's a pretty sweet gig, and being able to see how the other half lives makes me feel happy that I'm not a rich douche and reassures me that my financial priorities are intact. You didn't have time to buy a $2 loaf of bread and are going to pay $20 to have it delivered to your door? Really? I'm an event manager for an energy company in Texas. I get to tell people what to do, manage a $500,000 budget, and travel some. No degree. Experience matters most. Make $60K a year and earn almost twice what my wife with a master's makes. Pizza delivery driver. Make great tips and get to jam to music while on the way to deliveries, and also everyone at work, even the managers, smoke tons of devil's lettuce. I work in the retention department for a cable company. I take 30 to 40 calls a day from people calling to cancel their cable. I usually take them out of it. I often slash their bills. I sometimes give them something for free, and every once in a while they really do cancel. Every time they're mad or unhappy when the call starts, and every time at the end of the call, they're satisfied. It isn't a very easy job, but it is one that pays me pretty well. And I get free cable. I think that South Park episode has ruined me, the one where like the cable people or like the TV people are just like, oh, you want to cancel your package? Really? I play video games for a living. More specifically, I live stream via Redacted so people can see what I play as I do my best to entertain them. My fans make it the best job in the world. I checked out the link to their Twitch channel and they were taken off apparently for violations, but as far as I know about Twitch, it's very easy to get kicked off Twitch. Unless, of course, you're one of the golden boys or chosen ones that they decide can get away with whatever they want. Digital compositing in an animation studio. There's deadlines, sure, and it can get pretty stressful, but I love it. VP of operations for a steel foundry. I started working at the foundry my dad worked at out of high school just to make some money and never left the industry. I've spent the last 14 years of my life doing some really hard, dirty jobs, moving across the country, one foundry at a time, and learning all sorts of cool stuff. I started getting sent to Six Sigma training, then TPS. Now, I'm pretty much my own boss, and I live where I've always wanted to live. Funny how things work out. I am a 35-year-old and I do CAD work for computer chips. In fact, I manage a team of over 10 people. Most have bachelor's or master electrical engineering degrees. I've been in the industry and doing this job since I was 19. I married my pregnant girlfriend
girlfriend when I was 18. My son is smart, respectful, and sarcastic. My daughter is smart, hardworking, and witty. I could not imagine a better life. I live in Seoul, Korea. My job is to commentate Korean professional gamers playing high-level games, usually StarCraft 2. I'm essentially a sports broadcaster for esports, and I do it abroad. It's a really fun job, and I don't regret for a second moving over here. My life changed when I got here, and it just keeps getting better. I'd never heard of StarCraft until StarCraft 2 came out, and I gotta say, I'm really surprised by that game's longevity. I sit in back of helicopter and fly around Bavaria all day, making sure we don't crash into stuff. I make about 30,000 a year, have no bills, and a house provided for me. Well, ain't some people just luckier than others? Construction superintendent. No day is the same and always meeting new people. Have to be on your toes all the time. Love the challenge. A degree doesn't guarantee the ability to do this job. Experience, multitasking, and problem-solving skills are must-have qualities. I'm an IT consultant and infrastructure architect for some of the most impactful IT environments in the country today. I have a great deal of satisfaction when I debate, convince, and badger people into doing things the right way to ensure that millions of people have their information protected and the environment is stable. Sitting down with what can't even be called a design and throwing out, then designing, implementing, and integrating everything from scratch is incredibly satisfying. And the working relationship I have with the team that all work together to make this happen is just, it's great. Still need to get paid more though. I am currently an arborist, tree climber, or tree trimmer. It's a fun job that is physically and mentally challenging. I also used to fight wildland fires, forest fires, with the US Forest Service. I was a member of an elite firefighting crew called a hotshot crew. It was a great job that I absolutely loved, but being gone almost all summer is difficult as a husband and father. Well, thank you for your service, and I have also played with the idea of being an arborist at one point. It's weird how many of these jobs have come up that I've even looked into. I am a power lineman. I climb power poles when applicable, bring electricity to where it is needed, put my crew on the moon, there wouldn't be a dark side. I am a cook at the Old Faithful Inn in Yellowstone National Park. A lot of these stories are like 10 years old. I do wonder if a lot of these people are still doing the same job, or maybe they moved on to even greener pastures that they enjoy even more. I'm a rope access technician for an inspection company. I love my job. I get to climb and rappel bridges, dams, roller coasters, refineries, buildings, and wind turbines to perform inspections, maintenance, and various tasks at height. Starting out pay was so well, I couldn't believe I didn't need a degree to do this. I have inspection certifications now that pretty much set me up for a career that is in very high demand. Rope access is exploding in this industry. It is such a fun job, I don't see why everyone isn't doing it. 3 words, buddy. Fear of heights. That's not referring to me. I am fine with heights. I used to be terrified of them though when I was a kid. I own and operate a cocktail lounge and restaurant. Started as a bartender, then manager, then GM. I eventually saved up to buy my first bar, eventually turned it into 4. I'm in my 40s and make more money than pretty much all my friends, a good 6-figure income. It was a long, hard road, but I'm set more or less. I could sell the lot and retire now, no worries. I love my career. It was a wonderful and hard road filled with focus, determination, and failure. It then eventually led to success. Degrees are extremely important, of course, but it doesn't guarantee success. You're limited to your own motivation and determination. Well, at least it seems that way to me. I do software support and a little development for a very large software company. I also occasionally visit custom sites to help them implement new versions of our stuff or whatever. However, I got very lucky getting this job. I was in university as a co-op student, and I took work term at a medium-sized software company. Worked there, loved it. They asked me to come back for a second term. In the middle of that one, my boss just offered me a full-time contract at $52K. At the time, I was broke and I absolutely hated my program, chemical engineering. So I took the job thinking I'd do it for a couple of years to get some savings to go back to school. That was almost 7 years ago. When I'm dealing with reasonable customers, the work is great. I solve puzzles. The only stuff I don't like dealing with is the political BS, i.e. our rules say that we shouldn't be on the phone with someone to hold their hand through very well documented procedures. But this customer sent an angry email to a manager, so we'll bend over backwards for them. I hate the squeaky wheels. However, there are tons of perks. For starters, I work from home. To not have to deal with rush hour traffic and be able to make my own lunch in my own kitchen has been very healthy for me. Secondly, I get paid a pretty good amount, $70K a year, currently with 1 to 2 raises a year and bonuses. I also get to write off parts of my electric and internet bills, among other things. Not to mention, I can work anywhere I want as long as I have a decent internet connection and I'm online during the hours I'm supposed to be online. This means I can go visit family or whatever without having to take a vacation. It's a pretty good gig. I write fiction online and draw donations
donations from my readers for a livable wage. Writing like I do, putting up installments on a regular basis, it fixes many of the problems with writing. With regular writing, it's a lonely business. You don't get feedback or see if it'll take until it's done, and you don't get the money until it's done and successful. What I'm doing, I get regular comments. I can chat with my readers, I can shape the narrative if feedback indicates it's necessary. I do write my stories, reader feedback can inform it, but it's not a choose-your-own adventure. It helps that it's sort of marketing and social media on its own too. I finished my first story, a 26-book epic written over 2.5 years, and publishers, editors, startups, and agents in a small video game company have expressed interest in working with me. I have a wealth of options now, a large-ish audience of 12,000 plus readers at the height of my last story. That's very attractive to outside parties, possible Kickstarters, self-publishing, traditional publishing, or something in between. Generally speaking, I'm pretty stoked to get up in the morning these days. It's nerve-wracking at times, those 15 to 20 minutes after my chapter goes live and before the first comment comes in, and there are ups and downs, but I love what I'm doing. Well, that just sounds like a dream. I love writing personally. I don't have that much confidence in my entire ability to write, like setting up areas or dialogue and whatnot, but I do have some concepts and ideas that I think are absolute gold, and I would like to get out there someday, so this just sounds cool. I'm a professional audio and lighting technician for live events, raves, rock shows, corporate meetings, politician rallies, fundraisers, sporting events, presidents past and present, you name it, I've done it. I'm a broadcast engineer. There isn't a school for what we do. You just start from the bottom as a wireman and work your way up. You earn the right to be called an engineer, regardless of your education. When you watch a live televised event, say the Super Bowl or Academy Awards, there are usually a team of people making sure that all the cameras, audio, and video equipment on site is functioning. I'm one of those guys. Stress level is very high, but the skills and relationships you develop, it's worth it. Honestly, it's the perfect job for a single person, as you'll spend more time on a plane than anywhere else, but the scenery changes every day, and the pay at my company is the best in the industry. For the record, I am sorry if some of you get frustrated when I decide to change voice randomly, but sometimes I get bored just reading in the same voice. Pilot, I get to travel the world, the pay is crap, and you work a ton. I can't imagine doing anything else. I flew a plane once. It's very expensive to get even an hour-long lesson on a plane. It's crazy. Like getting your pilot's license, I believe, you need at least 60 hours in the air before you can move on to more stuff. I'm a butcher. It's kind of cool seeing all the cuts of meat you can get out of one section of an animal. Also, being able to take a 1,000-pound animal and turn it into something people can pick up at the store and throw in a pan for dinner is awesome. And now you're making me hungry. Children of single parents, who was the worst person your parent has dated? My dad started dating a woman who firmly believed that I was part of his old life and that he needed to cut ties with me. I was 14 and became terrified my mom would find someone who would do the same, and I'd end up with no family. My dad's ex-fiancée, she was almost our evil stepmother until one day she decided to call me a fat, lazy female dog, and my dad realized how awful she was to my sister and I. That was the day I learned how much he actually cared for us as well. He dumped her butt and kicked her out of the house. Her awful daughter left too, and it was finally peaceful at my dad's again. He dated her on and off for years afterwards until she went back with her ex-husband. My dad has sworn her off for good now, which I'm glad for since she was a toxic person. I wish he could find someone worth his time though. I know he gets lonely. We'll call him Jose. Younger than my mom, chronically unemployed, a drinker, violent, and literally illiterate. But good looking, so my mom was smitten. My mom was from a good, in-name family. She had education, she had 2 little daughters, and she brought this scumbag to our peaceful little apartment, and he settled in right away, beating the crap out of all of us, impregnating my mom 4 times, running off for months, and never paying child support. When he was around, he would beat on us mercilessly, and my mom just stood by like a frickin' div, not intervening. When my younger brother was hooping for attention, Jose, a grown man, would hit him. Finally, my mom got diagnosed with lupus and Jose found out and literally abandoned her at the pharmacy. Years later, we find out that he had been sexually abusing my older sister. I am still so mad at my mom for the decades of bullcrap we endured with that man. He was literally a cancer and she couldn't summon the self-esteem to leave him, even when he was beating us with extension cords. There's a a poem by Nayira Wahid called Before You Get That Key Made that should be handed out to every single mother. To hell with your loneliness, protect your kids.
Well, that was utterly mortifying to read, and I hope things are better for you now. I can think of two. First of all, my biological father. They got back together for a few weeks. He was a douche. I'd recently got my first pet, a ginger kitten, but I was having previously unknown allergy issues with it. Things were stabilizing for me though, and I was getting used to it when one day my new cat disappeared. My dad admitted that he let it out of the door because he knew I'd been struggling. I spent weeks searching but never found it. The second was my stepdad. He was actually a really good guy and head over heels in love with my mom. I actually miss him a lot. The reason he was one of the worst? Well, my mom died when I was 17, and overnight my stepdad changed. Within a month, he was in a relationship with another family member, and suddenly he was violent and abusive, left me with no food or money, attacked me for accidentally breaking an ornament of his, and ultimately forced me to run away from home. I was on couch hopping for 9 months and never spoke to him again. Again, goddamn, I hope this person is doing better now. My mom is a serial dater. I have long since stopped paying attention to who she was dating. There was a few doozies, so let me talk about them. B. He came into my life when I was still forming self-awareness and memories. All I remember of him was screaming at my mum about leaving. G. A drunk who was verbally abusive. I remember him once deciding that I was not able to leave the table until I had finished every bite of the meatloaf that he made that night out of the blue. I threw up after stuffing myself with it. Mom stood there while this new rule was randomly enforced. He also called my brother the meaner term for a child born out of wedlock because he had been complaining of pain while standing up. Apparently, that was a personal attack and he needed to cuss out a 5th grader. M. A foster parent of 8 very unwell boys. I was the only girl in the house. There was sexual abuse that I was blamed for from his foster boys and from his own son. He would scream at me like his foster children because I didn't want to play basketball with them. I was screamed at for humming. He eventually had to move me into his closet, so that's where I slept, while he would drop his clothing on me in the morning. He was cheating on my mom while she fed and clothed and parented all 11 children in that house. When they broke up, Mom blamed me because I had torn the family apart when I told a teacher about the sexual abuse I was experiencing. ? Some guy she met at a bar, he was really interested in meeting her children, specifically 10-year-old me. Within 2 hours of him coming into the house, he had invited us all out to a nude beach nearby. It was very freeing, he insisted, and he thought I would love it there. Mom didn't make him leave the house for the night, and I slept in her room with the door locked. P. Of all the buttholes, this is who I hate the most. They dated on and off for a few years. I hated him from the minute I met him because my gut and my history had already labeled him as untrustworthy and a heel. I wasn't wrong. Not only did he cheat on my mom throughout their relationship, but he had hidden his AIDS status from my mom and also insisted culturally that he could not wear condoms. Mom thankfully hasn't tested positive for HIV, but part of me wants to deport that man. He was called Greg. He was an abusive prick. He used to lock me and my brothers out in the rain while my mom was at work and had no way of contacting her. He did it in all weathers. He broke my mom's arm in front of me and my brothers. One time, he grabbed my face so hard, his nails left a cut in my cheek. My mom and my 2 aunties got their own back though. My mom stole his change jar. His change jar had notes in. There were no 1 pences or 2 pences, only silvers and more. One auntie smashed every single thing he had. Car windows, house windows, TVs, everything. She also promised to beat him whenever she sees him, and she kept that promise, and has hit him 7 times so far on nights out. My other auntie kept reporting him to his boss for things that he hadn't done, but they couldn't disprove, like being horrible, swearing at her, and he was fired. He was a real piece of crap, and the actions of my family may have been drastic, if not illegal, but he mostly, definitely deserved this. You know, if you screw someone over or mess with someone and abuse their trust, their love enough over time, eventually they might just snap right back at you, and they might be snapping at you for years to come, and I don't think I'll feel sorry for you when they do. The worst definitely has to be my biological dad. I don't know too much about him, but he was an addict and later got sent to prison on the other side of the country for 5 years. He would write to my mom and me saying he would come back soon and everything would be good. At this time, I knew what state he was in, but I was being told that he was just working there. I was too young to understand. When I was 8, I got to talk to him on the phone for
the first time since he got arrested. He told me that he had been arrested and wasn't actually working there. My whole family knew where he was but wouldn't tell me otherwise, and hearing the truth both hurt and blew my mind, and I still have problems because of that today. After he got out of prison, he stayed on the other side of the country, got a construction job, eventually married a girl with 2 kids. Him and my mom were never married, by the way, and he and his wife had 2 more kids together. He later got back into his addictions. His wife left him in fear that her previous husband would find out about my dad's addictions and take his 2 kids back. He came back for a while and lived with his parents. I saw him maybe 2 times during this. Was weird talking to him. He later went back to the other side of the country, and last I've heard, he has been in and out of addiction centers and is likely in one of the many tense cities in that state. It's Cali. I don't know why I'm hiding it. Luckily, his dad, my grandpa, and most of the rest of his family are really good people. My grandpa keeps me updated on that side of the family, and I visit or go on vacation with them once in a while. Very nice people. 2 of my uncles are in the military. The other uncle suffers from alcohol addiction problems, but gets by best he can. So yeah, that's my story. Thanks to anyone who actually took the time to read it. You are most welcome. My dad has a habit of dating horrible women. The exception was his last girlfriend, who he thought of proposing to, but they broke up before that happened. He also had a thing for Nancys. The first Nancy he dated was okay. I just hated living with her and sleeping on her living room floor. The second Nancy was an abusive douche to my brother and I. We were forced to sleep in her son's room, and my bed was next to the wall adjoined to my dad and her room. She would force us to wake up at 5 a.m. every morning to go to her mother's, to go on a bus, to go to a youth church. Her mother accused me of causing her cat to kill its kittens. This Nancy made me and my brother eat outside during the height of mosquito season without bug spray, while she, my dad, and her son ate inside. She also wouldn't let me eat anything while she wasn't home and was angry when I went over to the apartment next door to watch a movie with the other little girl there and had Dorito chips because I was starving. This lady also grounded me for watching TV because I didn't wake her up in time to go on said church bus. I didn't have a clock in the room where I slept, and we weren't allowed to leave the room during the night. She didn't even have a working television. The third Nancy was a lazy, addicted scumbag who used my dad for money and treated her daughter and I like crap while treating my brother like he was king. Her daughter and I had to clean the entire apartment while she and my dad smoked and drank in the basement. We also weren't allowed snacks and had to make our own food. Mind you, these are all before I turned 13, and he dating these women for like a year at a time. My brother and I were frequently forced to move in with him and his girlfriends. We lived at our grandparents from the time I was 5, and they were my parents. I hated all of his girlfriends, except, like I said before, the last one. He's been single for a while now and seems to be doing okay. I rarely hear from him, but saw him this past Christmas, where he met my daughter for the first time. She's a year and a half old. We don't have a relationship really, but who knows, maybe he has changed, maybe not. For now, I keep my distance mostly for my daughter's sake and my sanity. 19 years of abuse and neglect isn't cancelled out in a night. So true. And what's with this theme of people neglecting their children, or people that they get with just openly neglecting their partner's children? Like, I don't get that. How could someone just sit by and let their children be unfairly treated? I mean, maybe this guy was like worried about, I'm playing devil's advocate here, but maybe this guy was like worried because he was living at her house. He had to play by her rules or else they wouldn't have anywhere to go for a while. I don't know. I should stop playing devil's advocate. People are messed up and stupid. Chad is the only swear word in our house. Our mom used to date this douchebag when my littlest brother was a couple years old, and sadly he picked up some of his habits. Funniest thing is, this butthole got karma big time. He adored his car so much, and every time he got a new one, he'd hit AITA. He used to abuse our mom for stupid reasons, and I had 2 kids who we all felt really bad for, especially his oldest. Hope his buck got even more karma. I was confused for him, and I was like, wait, he just hits AITA every time he gets a new car? It's like a ritual for him, but no, it's just an accident every time? I find that hard to believe. My dad's girlfriend straight up bullied me. My dad is currently dating a woman who manipulated the hell out of me as a child. When I was 9 or 10, she would tell me my real mom wanted to adopt my younger sister so she would get more money once she filed for divorce on my father. One time, I left my flat iron plugged in the bathroom. Not on, just plugged in. The next time I was at their house, I went to straighten my hair and couldn't find my flat iron, so I asked her if she saw it. She told me she threw it out and giggled like a freak. irked me so badly. I asked her why she would do that and begged her to tell me if she was kidding. I asked her to buy me a new one because I had spent my own money on it and really needed it for my poofy hair. She just laughed and kept telling me it was gone. I ended up spending $40 on a new one, and her response was that I wouldn't have had to do it if you hadn't left the first one plugged in. Fast forward to Christmas that year when I had one gift left under the tree. I opened it up excitedly to find, you guessed it, my frickin' flat iron. The one she threw away, and the one I had to replace because I left it plugged in the wall, same as you would a TV when it's not on. My dad's girlfriend crying, laughing, and I was just so confused and uncomfortable. I was 16 then, and 5 years later I still haven't forgotten that feeling. I feel like this may seem like nothing to some people, but this was all happening while she was trying to convince me to move out of my mom's house and in with her and my dad, accusing me of heavy substance use, starving myself, both never true, and telling me how I was the daughter she never had but always wanted. That crap was so confusing. I'm glad I'm away from that now and getting the help I need to move on. Moral of the story, don't give your partner control over your kids. They might be nuts.
I don't know, obviously, because I don't really have any intention of getting with a woman who already has children and whatnot, but it must be hard as, like, you know, a step parent of some sort, I suppose, to figure out where the line really is with telling your partner's kids what to do. I'm not referring to this situation, I'm just saying in general it's probably difficult. This woman in particular, though, sounds petty as all hell. The man she ended up marrying, he all out demanded respect, that my brother and I call him sir. He yelled a lot and whined when he didn't get his way. One time, I refused to call him sir, and he beat the crap out of me. Broke my hand and left bruises all up my back from being kicked on the ground. After that, he refused to take me to the hospital, so I, a boy, walked 5 miles to the hospital myself. Mom is still with him. She chose him over me. I don't see either of them anymore 20 years later. That is probably the greatest pain I can imagine, like your parent, your guardian, whatever, choosing someone else over you, unjustly, that is. I mean, if you've done really bad things and it's just like they've had enough of you, I guess that's the case, but in this case, my father dated a girl which made my parents' couple break. This girl was poorly washed, had her 7 kids homeschooled, and her husband was working far away. Plus, she looked like a literal witch. Raised by my dad, he dated a pathological liar named Patricia for about 7 years. My dad was moving from Florida to Middlesex, Virginia. He met her in VA. She seemed nice enough. I was 19 and joining the Marines, so I didn't go to Virginia with him. Stayed with a friend in Florida till I left. Gave my Bronco and my dog Angel to my dad to look after while I was gone. On my first deployment, I get told that my dog got very sick. I got her one summer when I was 10 and raised her myself because my dad was constantly working to support us. I loved her like a daughter. Now I'm getting told that Angel is dying. The dogs with my dad go outside and free roam because they're well behaved and intelligent, so they believe she may have ingested some antifreeze because their nearest neighbor has old vehicles that could potentially be leaking. We were thick as thieves. My little girl dies and I'm not there to comfort her. Fast forward many years, I leave the military. Go to Virginia. My dad is leaving Trish and moving a few counties away, so I had to figure out somewhere else to stay. Asked him what happened. He said that she was cheating, lying, abusing pain meds, etc. He said his first big flag was when he witnessed a friend of Trish's call her a liar. Trish swore on her daughter's life that whatever the topic was true in tears. Thing is, my dad knew for a fact that Trish was lying. She had also pulled the same act on him. Things unraveled gradually after that, and then he decided to seek greener pastures. About a year later, I get a call from my dad. He was on Facebook chatting with an old mutual friend he had with Trish, who also turned away from her. Conversation somehow got on the subject of the woman's very vocal dogs. She told my dad that Trish had told her she should just poison them with antifreeze if she disliked her dogs. Trish then went on to say that she had gotten rid of one of her ex's dogs that way. 2 + 2 = 4. Trish murdered my Angel. My dad is currently dating someone my age. He's 53 and she's 22, so there's that.
Who
Boy, that's an uncomfortably big age gap right there. I kind of think once you're in your 20s, it's really up to you who you date. It takes two to tango, and, just try and make wise choices that are good for you, Don't get with a douchebag who might abuse your trust or manipulate you. That's all I have to say about it, really. Well, pretty much every guy my mom has dated thus far has been a butthole in some way, shape, or form, but I'd say the worst was my stepfather, who was also the father to both my little brother and sister. See, my mom just turned 16 when she had me. I spent the first few years of my life with my grandparents while my mom went off to college. When she came back when I was 6, she brought back the man that would make my life a living hell for the next 4 years. My grandparents did shelter me a bit too much, and because of that, my stepfather tried to effectively rewrite me into his definition of a son, someone I was the exact opposite of. Because of how old I was, this was effectively impossible, and it made him angry. I was excessively punished for some of the smallest things. I forget what it was for, but once he wanted me to clean our entire dining room and kitchen floor with a toothbrush, a good 200 plus square feet of tile. I got done with one row before my mom stepped in. Thankfully, he would force me into doing things I simply didn't want to do. He forced me onto a carnival ride at our annual state fair that I was terrified to go on. I'm so thankful the guy I sat next to comforted me through it. There were some things he forced me into that left me with physical scars. We once threw a football at each other for so long that my thumbs started to bleed. They are really faint, but you can still see the scars from the day 15 years later. Time and time again, he was met with resistance in turning me into his definition of a son, and every time it happened, it only aggravated him more and more. It didn't help that in those first 6 years I developed a deep relationship with my grandparents, only for him to hate both of them with a burning passion for some reason. He finally died when I was 10 by rolling his car doing probably 80 miles per hour and got thrown out of the window for not wearing a seatbelt. Despite all of that, I don't hate him. The damage he did is certainly still there. I mean, he came in at the worst possible point in my life, and I'm not entirely sure if the damage could ever be truly repaired, but he did give me two of the best things in my life, my brother and sister. My brother is in his first year of college, going to ASU on a full ride from National Guard, and my sister is in her sophomore year of high school. When my brother graduated high school, he told me that he's the person he is today, mostly because of me, and him saying that was like getting a return on all of those years of hell. He was only 4 when my stepfather died, and it was years before my mom started dating again. Since she was the only income for our family, I was left with basically raising my 2 siblings while going through middle and high school. But that one line made it all worth it. Well, it truly warms my heart to find a story with a nice silver lining in it. When I was younger, probably around 9 or so, my mom dated this guy named Jim. I don't remember much about him except that he smelled weird. But after they broke up, she tried to delete herself and she was in the hospital for a few days. I remember her telling someone on the phone the night before that we, her 4 kids, would be fine without her. Thankfully, it's been 18-ish years later, and she's alive and well, and has been married for almost 16 years. As for my dad, he dated this awful woman named Tracy off and on for 7 or so years. She was always talking crap. She made mine and my dad's relationship horrible. She also made terrible eggs. When they broke up, my brother and I jumped for joy. He's been married for 4.5 years now to an incredible woman who I love dearly, and me and him are so close now. As soon as Tracy left, our relationship drastically changed for the better. I think this all goes to show how important it is to be brave. You gotta be brave to be able to walk away from a situation that you've grown used to out of fear of what the unknown is, because you might be like, yeah, things are bad now, but maybe they'll get better. But you need that bravery to be like, no, I need to walk away and whatever's gonna happen is gonna happen. It could be a bit worse. It could be a bit better. But, if you don't have the bravery to face life itself, really, when you're having a tough time, then you'll never know if you can actually find that happiness that you deserve. Hopefully that made sense. What question did you refuse to answer in a job interview? What's your zodiac sign? At first, I thought it was a joke, but he went on to explain in detail that it was very important that all the signs of his employees were compatible with his to prevent drama in the workplace. Then he started telling me about past lives.
It was a weird interview. Why should we hire you when you just got married and will probably be starting a family soon? I initially refused to answer, but couldn't resist by the end of the interview, telling them that I'd had my tubes tied for years and literally couldn't have kids. My race. They were interviewing to fill several positions at an office near downtown where they were in need of Spanish-speaking workers because the area served is mostly Hispanic. The interviewer asked me what is my race and where is my family from. He asked this because he saw that I am fluent in Spanish. I am mixed but look very white. He seemed a little perturbed that I was fluent in his native language. He kept questioning my race and why do I speak Spanish. I let him know that I have spoken Spanish since I first learned to speak. I had dual primary languages in my home. I took Spanish in high school and college. I was hired by college as a Spanish tutor, yet he doubted my knowledge because of my light skin. He did this to a girl I was chatting with in the waiting area too. I could hear her interview because they were doing them in cubicles, not private. With her, he insisted she couldn't really speak Spanish. The girl was black, but she was from Belize. Anyhow, we were both hired even though he failed us on our spoken language portions. She and I wrote grievances and had him removed, as well as our scores corrected. He interviewed another girl I knew who looks very Hispanic but barely speaks Spanish, and he does not write it. He gave her a 100. At my office, I found out he had given anyone that looked white or black very low scores, even if they aced the interview. Well, you know what they say, another day, another case of casual workplace racism. What social media do I use, and that I would be required to friend a member of the HR department. Luckily, nothing happened. There is a big trial going on at the time over employers' rights to spy on their employees online, so they didn't push it. This is kind of related to something I was thinking about the other day, in that the internet used to be a specific place that you would go to, like, just a computer, but nowadays it's on your phone, it's connected to your work, your life in general. It's just inescapable now. Honestly, I think the internet was way cooler before it became mainstream and with the advertisements, corporations and stuff. And well, you could turn off the internet at a time, but now it's just interconnected with your whole life. And that kind of sucks. I mean, can I leave my phone at home when I go for a walk? Sure I can, but I'm also thinking about work emails that I might need to respond to immediately. And just overall, it's harder to pull yourself away from the internet than it ever was in the early 2000s. Anyway, it's just genuinely good that you didn't have to do that because privacy is important, including in the workspace. What church do you attend? I told them I didn't really think it was relevant to doing the job. They thought otherwise. In the course of one interview, I was asked, are you married? Do you have kids? Are you pregnant? When do you plan on becoming pregnant? How old are you? The interviewer then proceeded to tell me she needed to ask these questions because the last LAA she hired was pregnant and left for maternity leave within 5 months, and the interviewer was not happy with that. The kicker, I was interviewing at a civil law firm and being interviewed by a paralegal. I'm a girl and have a trade and have always worked with only men. Most interviews bring up the subject in a polite way, like situational questions asking what I would do if a coworker was being sexist, etc. One particular interview with a company called Redacted, the interviewer straight out asked if I have a boyfriend. I said no, more out of shock. He continued on to say that I'm very young and around the age where I will probably get pregnant. I just sat there and stared. He then asked me if I planned on getting pregnant because if so, they would not hire me. Every single question he asked was specifically about the fact that I'm a girl, and there were no job-related questions. I just said, thanks, but no thanks. Well, if they made you that uncomfortable, it's probably for the best. The only reason why I think they might not have asked any work-related questions was probably because, as you already stated, this is an industry you are familiar with, I believe, and maybe your resume was just superb, so they didn't really feel the need to ask you any questions about that. I mean, from what you're saying, it sounds like they were already interested in hiring you, except they were worried about you going on maternity leave. Which, if I were to play devil's advocate and put myself in that position, yeah, it would be kind of annoying to hire someone, and then after a few months, it's just, well, bye. But at the end of the day, I also understand why women going out for jobs and careers would be really annoyed at that question being asked regularly. I mean, it comes up a lot in this topic. I once got asked what my parents did for a living. It was for a cleaning position. I was like, what? This guy asked me a bunch of word puns and riddles. I answered one thinking he was joking, then asked him what the point was, and he didn't know. Later in the interview, he asked me if I could promise I wouldn't get pregnant for my first year there. And in the end, I got the job.
I had a few in the only interview I ever did for a farm machinery sales agent. Can you safely say that you won't have any serious accidents whilst working here? Have you ever been pregnant, or are you going to become pregnant in the next 8 months? Have you ever had a boyfriend, and if yes, did you have sex while together? Are you still together? Again, I can understand the perspective and reasoning from an employer's standpoint of why they ask these questions, but to a degree, it's just like, where do you get off? Do you have any medical or mental issues? My medical history is my business, not theirs. I work at a major university, and we have an Office of Disability Services, which can assist you in accommodating a disability, etc. So I technically do have a disability according to the university's parameters, and therefore I fall under this protection. I've been shopping around for a different job at the same institution, and in one interview, they actually asked me what my disability was. I was shocked they would ask, since that is pretty expressly forbidden by university policy, and refused to answer. I didn't get a call back, but based on them asking, I didn't want to work there either. I may have dropped an anonymous note to HR about it. So I understand that this is to some degree not down, I guess, but I also actually don't really see the issue in asking. Like, I don't know, I've got learning difficulties, for example. If someone asks, I'm not really insulted by them asking. I'm more annoyed in situations where people make assumptions about me because I have a certain learning difficulty. What's even more annoying than that is when people just make assumptions based on their lack of knowledge on what I have. Like, I don't know, this one just seems kind of petty in my opinion. Would you and your wife be interested in this traveling swingers club I help run? We could show you the town, get you to meet new people. It'll be fun. I was the interviewer. I'm a guy. Interviewee was a girl. And in case you were curious about what question to never ask in an interview, this is among the top 10. No, I didn't answer it. I just said that we're out of time and I had to go. HR will show you out. Someone will be in contact with you. See you later. Goodbye. Nice knowing you. Too bad you can't stay. What happened was that she was banned from ever applying, and since Silicon Valley is so close-knit, I'm sure the HR types got the word out that she was a walking sexual harassment suit waiting to happen. I had an employer actually ask if I was a Christian. I'm not. He said that they follow Christian principles in their business and they'd like to know how I would fit in. I told him that it's illegal to ask that question and I'm not comfortable answering it. He ended the interview right there. I didn't get the job, which I'm glad for because working there sounds like my personal hell. I should have sued and just taken it easy for a few years. The CIA asked me what laws I would be willing to break if I was hired by them. I didn't really know how to answer and I said I would have to know more about the situation. I didn't get the job. I may not refuse to answer a question outright, but depending on the personality of the interviewer, I will make jokes about the questions, especially if it's obvious that they think the questions are stupid too. The biggest one for me is, what is your biggest flaw? If I know the interviewer is receptive to jokes, I'll reply with something like, a low tolerance for irrelevant questions. We had a good laugh about it and moved on to the next question in the interview. Interview question at a small consulting firm in DC. Did great work, friends there with nice salaries and benefits. I put down on my resume, as a consultant at another firm, this line, paraphrasing for privacy and not doxing myself, optimized performance and logistics of new product line, increasing profit margins by 30% at big firm. It's one of my huge achievements, and leaving out details was never a problem for any other consulting firms like McKinsey, for example. I didn't mention who that big client on the resume that I was working for was, because most of them are supposed to be confidential. The interviewer's eye fell on that bullet, and as I revealed a couple of details like industry, my role, how I did the job, the achievement, etc., she insisted on asking who the client was, which doesn't really matter at that point. I kept rebuffing her, stating that I can't reveal my client or the product lines still in development at the time due to confidentiality agreements. This went on for 5 minutes until the interview basically derailed and she ended it, telling me that I was uncooperative and I shouldn't expect a call. After cursing my luck and damning that wretched woman, seriously, who insists on asking such a stupid question? I can't reveal who it is because I breached contract, and in consulting, you should respect your client's privacy. I did get a call a couple of weeks later from a board member who heard about my interview and offered me a job. It was a good year, and my interviewer got flack some months after she left the company because she started revealing details about her clients which got an entire team at that firm in trouble because of breach of contract. Big lesson, kids. If you have a confidentiality agreement that is still ongoing and hasn't expired, you should respect it, even in an interview for another job. Otherwise, kiss your career goodbye. I mean, it's kind of a good idea to just generally respect contracts that you sign in general, and if you're not sure about them, read them very, very carefully. Or pay someone to read them, because reading contracts can be super boring. I sat in on an interview for a PA with my boss. When on the subject of marriage and kids, my boss asked the interviewee if she had married out of love or if her family had arranged it. She answered love, and we thought that was the end of it. He then proceeded to ask if she was raising her kids as Sikhs and if she would be comfortable working in an environment with lots of men. I cringed so much in that interview, but the lady held her own and is basically still working for us. There was no malice in what my boss was asking. He was genuinely just interested in her culture, but went the complete wrong way about it. Just the other week, when we were all out for a meal, he kept asking her if his pronunciation of basmati was right. The best of it is she came from an Indian family but has lived the Western culture all her life. She's just as clueless as he is, but finds it all very hilarious. I was actually asked for the username and password to my Facebook, Twitter, and any other social media accounts I may have. I flat said, no, that information will not be forthcoming. The interviewer looked up as though to say, just who the heck do you think you are? And replied, excuse me? I replied that I never saw the use or need for social media. I have the ability to instantly message, call, or go to meet people within my circle in person, and I felt that social media was a tool further used to divide us rather than bring us together. He just stared at me until I finally said, I follow a 3P rule when I'm online. I never post anything I don't want my parents, a priest, or a predator finding out, which means you can rest assured that there will be no impropriety to harm your business. I'm here to make money by making you money. He continued to stare at me, and I finally said, I'm sorry, I seem to be wasting your time. I thank you anyway, and you have a wonderful day. I got a call 3 weeks later, same guy. He actually tried looking me up and couldn't find me or a reference to me. I didn't get the job, but I did get considered. The moral to this tale? Follow the 3P rule and never ever use your real name, nor should you ever allow anyone else to use your real name if you can at all control it. Okay, now first off, obviously, interviewer, massive invasion of privacy, stupid question to ask, but also, while right, this person definitely went off on something that they've been thinking about for a long time in their feelings of social media that just wasn't necessary. And I say that as a bit of a hypocrite because while it is my job to read these for you and give my thoughts on some of them, I do absolutely go on tangents. So the interview questions can be very different from what we're used to in the West. It is common to ask what your parents do, if you're married or plan on getting married, how much alcohol you can drink. This is not to determine if you have a drinking problem, but because after work drinking with co-workers is a big part of Korean work culture. So the more booze you can handle, the better. How much money you have, religion, and when you apply for a job, you have to send a photo of yourself along with your application. If you're not deemed good looking enough, and often if you're black or Indian or another undesirable race, you won't get the job. It is slowly changing though. Anyone else pick up on the discomfort in my voice as I was quoting that? Why is a pretty girl like you looking for a job? You should just find a rich guy and get married. For context, I was fresh out of high school at 17 plus, and this was the first interview I had ever done in my life at a small shipping yard for the position of a clerk. I decided to go to college after that. It does get worse as I approach marriageable age, as constant barrages of questions on my plans to get married and how many kids I want to have get into the interview instead of what I want to bring to the table at work and discussing my career prospects. Women have a big challenge when it comes to being taken seriously at work, especially if you look a certain way. Yes, I do get a lot of probing why I didn't try my hands at sales, as it would be just too easy for you to get a lot of sales during the time I was at marketing. Previous salary. It's none of their business. I will talk about the salary range that I'm interested in, but answering previous salary questions will only screw you. That is certainly true. Never ever disclose your previous salary with a new potential employer.
Well, I refuse to answer if I was religious and not a fornicator.
Well, that's all right if you don't want to tell us, sir, because God already knows. I assume this was for an employer that had a very religious tilt. When I lived in DC, I had an interview with the mayor's office. Mind you,
you, he was a mayor I didn't particularly like. When I got there, it was like 75 people waiting in a big room. When it was finally my turn, they brought me into another room. The first 5 minutes were standard interview questions, but the two 20-year-olds conducting the interview were completely uninterested. Neither of them looked up from their Blackberries once. I was getting extremely irritated, as I knew I had much more political experience than them anyway. So when one of them, with her face still in her Blackberry, said, "Tell me 5 things you love about Mayor Fenty," I had it. I said, "I think we're done here," and got up and left. That got them to look at me. Not a question so much as a request. Was a senior in college in 2012, so the job market was still for crap, and anyone who had graduated college in the last 4 to 5 years was actively fighting for any and all open positions of any sort still. Be it in waiting tables, answering phones, landscaping, nannying, under the table work, and obviously any entry-level positions. So I managed to get an interview with a marketing firm. I'm sure most of you know where this is going. It was a direct marketing service where you go door to door. My first interview goes well, and I'm a bit confused as this was in an office park suite office. They purportedly have 55 employees, yet this office suite was 2 offices and a small front desk area for the secretary. Where was everyone's desks, I asked myself. Later that night, I received a call back for a second interview, so for a second weekend in a row, I head back to my hometown, miss my current job, and 2 weekends in a row worth of cash working at a late-night restaurant, and gas money for 2 round trips, totaling in at around $100 in gas, 2 full tanks, and a loss of almost an entire $375 paycheck for that half of the month, plus a solid $150 in tips for each weekend missed. Showed up for the second interview, and instead of sitting in that little office and answering more questions, meeting people around the office and the like, they take me and 6 other people outside. We're then told we will be going out in the field for the day and knocking on doors. None of us were told about this, so all 4 of us females are in interview suits in heels. I start immediately hounding the interviewer and insist I am being told where I'm being taken, and he says he isn't at liberty to disclose that. So I confrontingly state, "Let me get this straight. You want me, a 20-something female, to get into a car with out-of-state plates with 3 men I've never met before, to go somewhere unknown, to walk around somewhere unknown for an unknown amount of time on the fly, and I have to turn my cell phone off?" He just looks at me like a moron after I've spelled out how sketchy this all is. So after some awkward silence, I continue, "How dare you lie to myself and all of these other clearly desperate folks about every aspect of this job and cost me money to get here. Screw you if you think I'll come with you, and screw you again if you think I won't go into details on this to the BBB." It's then that he flips out and follows me as I head back into the office park. The interview room now has been retransformed into the CEO's office, nameplate and everything. When they asked me what I was doing, I demanded my resume back from their pile and told them I'd be spreading the word and make sure others know before coming in here. They freaked out, offered to pay me back for my gas to try and prevent me from reporting them. I let them write me a check, and just as I was leaving their office/interview room, a new slew of kiddos my age were shuffling in for their ill-fated interviews. I warned them all loudly and cursed out the CEO again, and was followed out by all 8 people. They were supposed to interview again. Being a journalism student, I did the only thing worse than reporting them, which I also did. I got in contact with a local reporter for the paper who was a friend of mine and got them to run an article about scam companies and interviewing vulnerable and desperate recent grads. Their company logo made the header of the page. I actually personally have some experience with fraud companies. I did an interview in 2019 and I joined a company for a little bit. I won't go into details on what it was, but I always got this very weird feeling about everyone there. Not everyone there, but the people who owned the place, I guess. And as it turned out, when I was discussing it with someone that I worked with, a while later, like a few years later, and we ran into each other, I asked about it, and they were like, "Oh yeah, they were actually using it as a cover to sell the devil's lettuce, and who knows what else." And I was just like, "Oh my freaking god, I knew that place was off!" After that, I was glad I was only there for maybe a month or 2.
tifu? This was during a mock interview while I was in college. The professor had her husband come in and we had to go in one by one and do an interview just like in real life. Well, everyone is going in and coming out smiling, not taking too long, so I thought it would be a cakewalk. My turn is next. I go in and everything is going smoothly. He takes a look at my resume and sees that I was in the military. He asks, "Tell me about your time in the military." So I tell him what I did, that I worked with a variety of different people from different backgrounds with different views on life and opinions, and that I supervise people, etc. He says, "Okay, good," and continues with the interview, asks a few more questions, then says, "Tell me about your time in the military." I figured maybe he didn't realize he already asked that question, or maybe it was a test, so I repeated what I said. He starts turning slowly in his chair, looking at the ceiling, and says again, "Tell me about your time in the military." I just looked at him. He stopped spinning in his chair and looked at me. After about 20 seconds, he says, "Okay, we're done here." I got a B. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Linked in the description below.